IB Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. We have an awesome show coming your guys' way. Like we talked about on yesterday's show, we switched up the format a little bit. We covered keys to victory yesterday. So today, we are going to be talking through game records. We're going to give our game prediction. And then, Brian, the rest of the show today, we're just talking ball, man. We get to go over the rest of the slate of college football. We have a bunch of different games. We're
going to talk about more than 10 games. I'm not going to break them all down as thoroughly, but we're going to talk about over 10 games. Also, a reminder to everybody, we are doing an IB tailgate this weekend and next weekend. So you're definitely going to got the parking passes today. My guy Irish for Life 99 helped me out to secure those 2 parking passes. So we're going to get those set up. Going to have a tailgate this weekend. Obviously, we'll try to get set up around like 10 or 11. I'll let you guys know more for sure. Follow me on Twitter. You can see on the message boards. And then next week, we'll have a much longer one, even bigger spread. So if you're going to be at the game this weekend, come over to Joyce Lot. Find us. We'll have the Irish Breakdown flag. We're going to try to have it flying, but we'll have our Notre Dame tent. You'll see me. And then I'll put a picture on the board and tweet out what light pole that we'll be at. So, yeah, very, very excited about that. Very excited about that.
A lot of good stuff happening today, and we're going to get started by talking through what our game predictions are for the Notre Dame NC State game. Reminder, that game kicks off at 3:30 p.m. this Saturday. This is the dreaded Peacock-only game, but you can also listen to it on Notre Dame radio. You can, if you're going to go to the game, you can be there. If you're going to watch it out in public, I can't do those things. I can't watch Notre Dame games out in public. I'm a little too loud. Got to be somewhere where I can kind of be in my own space. But 3:30 p.m. this Saturday, quick reminder to everybody, Notre Dame is favored by 22.5 points. The over-under for the game is set at 60.5 right now.
Trev, I really thought that number was going to go down as the week went on, and it grew. Like, I'm very surprised by that. Very surprised by that. But hope it plays out that way. Really hope it plays out that way.
Man.
It'd be nice. I'm not someone who likes good games when it's my team. Whether, and again, I don't watch NFL anymore, but when it was the Broncos, whether it was the Reds, whether it was the Celtics back in the day when I used to watch the NBA, whether it's Notre Dame, whether it was Michigan basketball back in the day, it didn't matter. I don't like close games. I'd rather be a blowout than a close loss. Because I don't have to deal with the thanks of, we might win, and then boom. I'd rather Miami 2017 than BC 1993. Honestly, especially if you're not going to get a shot to play for the title. It'd be one thing if you're still going to get your shot to play for the title, but 93, they didn't get a rematch. So yeah, just the angst of the moment, it gets to me. So I'm hoping that the spread turns out to be what it is. That's how the game kind of plays out. It'll be fun.
You and me both, man. We're going to be talking about the spread a little bit tonight. Vince and I are tonight on the spread option on the CFB Nation channel, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Make sure you tune into that one as well. But Brian, this is to your point, this is a big game for Notre Dame. At the start of the week, we talked about how these next 2 games between NC State and USC were going to be huge. Notre Dame is now in game number 2 of their 3-game homestead before their second bye week of the season. And at the start of the season, obviously we didn't know how the season was going to be right now. We assumed worst case scenario, you go 1-1, you split the first 2 games, and then reality sets in, and then Notre Dame is where they're at. But at the start of the season, we did talk about how this was the game that we had slated as Notre Dame's trap game, and it's still for a good reason. Now, they're at the point in their season where they can't overlook anybody. Every week is a playoff game. But with that being said, man, this is still going to be an interesting matchup on Saturday.
It is. Look, they are who we thought they were, right? That's kind of my take on NC State, meaning they're not always the most disciplined team in the world. That's why they're going to lose games that they shouldn't lose. But they're also going to beat some teams maybe that you don't think they should beat because they're also very talented. And I actually think Dave Dorn and his staff have recruited well. I just don't think they develop all that great. And I just don't think that they necessarily get the most out of their players. But NC State is who we thought they were. We thought going into the year, Trevor, when we previewed them, part of the reason that we thought this was a trap game is because upsets, like the recipe for upsets, by it more often than not. And it's been different it's been different for Notre Dame in recent years because their offense hasn't been very good. But when you look around college football, a lot of times the upsets that happen are teams that can outscore you. And like you look in teams that have a dynamic quarterback. Well, NC State can score. They've got really athletic receivers. They've got a talented running back, and they've got a dynamic quarterback. And that's what makes it a little bit like, how's this one going to go? And it's a game that Notre Dame should win. It's a game that if Notre Dame plays their B+ or better game, it won't be competitive. But it's a game that also anything less than your B+ could get you beat. And that's what I'm really looking forward to. Yeah,
this one's going to be, I'm hoping to what you said earlier, this isn't a nail biter at the end of the day. Hopefully Notre Dame can come in and handle business. That's the goal. And that would make for a much easier Saturday afternoon for you and I both. But at the end of the day, this is going to be an important game for Notre Dame. They, started out the season 0-2. They've now ripped off 3 straight. Goal is to get to the bye week at 5-2. And then we're right back into the playoff discussion talking about Notre Dame and where they stand. But you have to handle business these next 2 weeks, and it starts with NC State, Bryan. But you're right. This is a very, very important game. And when you look at Notre Dame, it's important for a couple different reasons. Obviously, yes. One, it's important, big picture, they have to continue winning. But it's also important when you look at either side of the ball. The offense is coming off of their, yes, you could call it most lackluster performance since week 1. And the defense is slowly ascending, but this is going to be the game that tells us, okay, is this now becoming a trend? Or were Boise State and Arkansas somewhat kind of a flash in the pan, and now they're resorted back to who they were the first 2.5 games? It's really important.
Yeah, it's both games are going to tell us if what we saw last week was a trend. One of them we want to be a trend, the other one we don't. Really, offensively, we don't want that to be a trend. And honestly, Trevor, I don't think it will be. And our predictions will kind of show that out. I don't think it will be a trend, but you never know. But defensively, you hope that does become a trend. And I've got a couple articles out on the IB, and I'll have a few more out over the next couple of days. But this is going to be a tough test for the defense. I'll put it to you like this: if the Notre Dame defense does what we want it to do schematically, and keeps NC State at 24 points or less, that to me is a sign of they've turned the corner. This is who they are. That's the kind of offense this is. So let's say the game's like 38-24, 34-24, 31-20, anything like that, where the defense scores 20, or NC State scores 24 points. That's not an elite job by the defense, but that's a good job by the defense, because you're not going to hold them to less than 24 if you don't play well, and if you don't have some sort of game plan that's geared to play to your potential, unless NC State does what Arkansas did, which is, for all the good things Notre Dame did, Arkansas left a lot of points on the board because of their own mistakes. First drive of the game, they settled for a field goal because their quarterback throws a bad ball to a wide open guy on 3rd and 4. That wasn't the Notre Dame defense doing anything. 2 series later, they throw a swing route on 3rd and 5. Running back is wide open to get to the first down, and the quarterback just misses them. Like, that's not the Notre Dame defense doing anything. Last week against Boise, the Notre Dame defense was making stops. It wasn't about, if Boise makes this play, if he looks at this open receiver, there was none of that. You break down the film, you're like, no, that was a dominant performance. That wasn't Boise shooting themselves in the foot. That was a flat out, you whooped their butts. And so I want to see that trend. So that's what's really interesting about this game, Trev, is again, we're going to learn a lot about this football team in every phase this weekend. And I'm looking forward to it, because you just want to know, right? And that's what, you learn about a team as you get deeper into the season, is you start to find out, okay, this is who they are. You can look back and, 7, 8, 9 games in and say, okay, these are the anomalies. These are the games that define that team. Like, by the time we got to November, we could look back at Northern Illinois and Miami of Ohio and say those were more anomalies. That was part of the growth of that football team I had to go through. This is more who you are. And it really came out of, we talked about how this team really turned a corner after week 5 last year. Defense was more consistent. Offense started to dominate. That's when the D-line started to really take over on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, they started to find their groove. They put up 49 on Stanford. You put up over 50 on Navy. And you hope that that's kind of the game 5 is when the launch point happens for Notre Dame. Because Louisville was a very similar game to Boise State. Better team last year than the one you faced this past week. But the offense did some good things, had some big plays, but it also left some stuff on the field and had a turnover that gave Louisville a short field, and your special teams had a turnover. So, they even made more mistakes last year than they did in this game, which is why Boise State only had 7 points compared to 24 for Louisville, because let's be honest, 14 of Louisville's 24 points were gifts from Notre Dame, with the fumbled kick return and then the Jadarian Price fumble. But it was that game where, Trev, we came out of it thinking this team is close. We started to see flashes of who this team is, and then boom, they really started to take off. And that's kind of been, I don't know that I love it, but that's kind of been Marcus Freeman's MO at Notre Dame. Even last year, in the great run last year, I mean, you look at 2023, you could say that's the exception, but they never really played anybody good till week 5. And then they went to like a 3-game rut. And then second half of the year, they were pretty darn good outside of the Clemson game. 2022, same thing. Notre Dame starts 0-2, barely beats Marshall. Good wins over North Carolina, BYU. You lose to Stanford to game 6. And then after that, they just were pretty much dominant till the USC game at the end of the year when, they had to go try to stop that Caleb Williams offense without Cam Hart, without Tariq Bracy. So that's where I kind of look at it and say, these teams usually under Marcus Freeman take off in the second half of the year. Does that start this weekend? Is this team going to be like that? Well, we're going to find out. And that's one of the things that makes me excited about this team. On top of the fact, I just think it's 2 talented football teams, and I do like when 2 talented football teams play each other.
Yeah, I'm going to be very interested to see if that trend continues from Boise State. No, Marcus Freeman talks about it all the time in his press conference about how they need, self-scouting and they have to go back and look in the mirror. Well, ideally, maybe moving forward, maybe in 2026, you don't need 4 or 5 games to sit down and look in the mirror and do enough self-scouting to know who you are. Ideally, that just kind of happens right out of the gate. But different conversation for a different day. The conversation we're having today, Brian, we are going through our predictions for the Notre Dame-NC State game this Saturday afternoon, 3:30 p.m. in the stadium. I'll go ahead and get us kicked off, Brian. And then typically how we do this is we give our score prediction, and then we talk through how we believe the game is going to unfold. And then after that, we're going to be talking some game wreckers on offense and defense. So to get us kicked off here, Brian, I have Notre Dame winning this one. I have them winning 41-27. That is my final score prediction, the Irish over the Wolfpack. I'm with you. I think the offense gets back on track this week. And some people hear that when I tell people, the offense has to get back on track, or Notre Dame's offense is preparing for a quick rebound or something like that. People hear that and immediately associate that with, well, I don't think they played bad against Boise State. They moved the ball. Agreed. Yes, they did. They moved the ball seemingly without penalties at will and still only put up 28 points on the board. We're talking about an offense that scored 105 combined points between Purdue and Arkansas. Arkansas was on the road. Then they come back home. You have 2 turnover on downs. Both of them are on your side of the 50. You had some penalties that put you behind the sticks. Those are the procedural things that we're talking about, because this offense is good enough where if they don't shoot themselves in the foot, they are just going to naturally put up 30 to 40 points a game, depending on the opponent. That is how good this offense can be if they don't beat themselves. I see them getting back on track. Defensively, I am cautiously optimistic, I think is the best way to word how I feel about this defense right now. But I'm hesitant to have confidence in Chris Ash specifically with this game plan, with this style of offense. Is he going to be aggressive? Are you going to maintain that aggressive philosophy despite going against an offense not like Boise State that is going to spread you out, try to take shots on the perimeter? Because like we talked about all week, it was no secret what Boise State was going to try to do on offense. Much different animal when you're defending, Noah Rogers and Justin Jolly and Hollywood Smothers. CJ Bailey's a very different type of quarterback than Maddox Madsen is. So I'm cautiously optimistic about the defense as a whole. And I'm a little hesitant around Chris Ash's game plan. But if it pans out the way that I do think that it will, I see this being a 41-27 game. Back and forth in the first half, but the third quarter is going to be key, like it has all season for Notre Dame. Notre Dame has outscored their opponents 42-10 in the third quarter this season. They haven't allowed an opponent to put any points on the board in the third quarter since Texas A&M. And so,
and the only touchdown of the third quarter was the first one that they went through in the Miami game, and so they haven't allowed a touchdown since the first drive of the third quarter.
Yep. So the third quarter is going to be very, very crucial for Notre Dame in this one, and then that's when I think this one kind of opens up. I think Carr's going to take advantage of some mismatches in the passing game with Raridan and Love and Price against their linebackers and safeties. And I do think at some point in the third quarter, the defense is going to come away with a big turnover that really breaks it open. My bet is for it to be on Christian Gray. I think the stars are kind of aligning in the spot. I'm 1 for 1 so far. I called Tay Johnson with an interception last week, so I'm going to go Christian Gray with an interception this week. So we'll see if that trend continues. But that's how I see this game playing out. I think that, to your point that you talked about earlier, Brian, Notre Dame kind of finds their footing in Game 6, and then they're just going to start rolling. And so I think they come away with the victory 41-27 in South Bend on Saturday.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So
yep.
So with your prediction, 41-27, is that with you? Obviously, we don't know. We got to see it and all that. Is that with you thinking that the defense figures it out? Or is it more so like kind of more Arkansas-ish type of game plan? Like, what are your thoughts there?
I would say somewhere in between Arkansas and Boise State. I don't think they're going to be as passive against Arkansas. Some of it is just going to be the talent of the NC State offense.
Okay.
Sometimes when you have two good opponents going up against each other, especially NC State's offense, they're just going to make some plays. I'm high on Hollywood Smothers. I could see him ripping off one, but not so much to where they're just playing passive and back for basically 3.5 quarters until they decide to flip the switch. So
okay. And then do you have NC State scoring late?
Yes.
Or is it okay?
Yeah,
so
I
have it like 41-20, and then they score a late touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That helps me give more context to that. I'm actually going to do something I don't normally do, Trev. I'm going to make 2 predictions. Yeah. I'm going to do that. Yep. Because you know why? Because I can. But there's some logic to it. So go with me here.
Okay.
Here's my actual prediction, right? This is the one I'm going to put in our article yesterday as my prediction is. Because with Chris Ash, when it comes to Chris Ash, I am 100% in. You got to show me that last week wasn't the anomaly. So my prediction in that regard is 45-31, because we see this in a lot of similar ways. I don't think NC State can run with Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is going to be too balanced for them. I think their offense is very undisciplined. As long as Notre Dame comes out and plays their game, I don't even mean like you've got to play a perfect game, just play your game. And I think they move the ball on NC State. And I do think we're going to get a turnover I love your prediction there. We're going to get a turnover by the defense that's going to set up the offense for a score if they don't get a score themselves. So I'm with you on that. But I just don't have a lot of faith that Chris Ash is going to really has it all figured out. Now, I think that we won't see a repeat of Texas A&M for a couple of reasons. Number one, they got better players in the field now. Getting Dallas Golden on the field, getting Tay Johnson on the field like almost every snap with Adon Schuler it's a different animal than what we saw. Just that personnel alone might have been enough to win the Texas A&M game, even with the absurdity of the defensive play calling in that game and defensive game plan in that game. And so that's why I see Notre Dame winning and winning by 14. I think this is how the game would have gone against Texas A&M had they had the right people on the field at that time. And so I go 45-31, and I could see it being a thing where NC State gets a late score, but I think NC State will move the ball on Notre Dame in this scenario. But they'll just be playing catch up after a while. And I do think the defense, I think the halftime score is going to be a lot closer than the end of game score in this scenario as well. Because to your point, they have been a good third quarter team. And really, they weren't great the first 2 third quarters. As we've talked about, A&M missed some chances for big plays in the third quarter, but they've been very good in the third quarter in the last 3 games. So that's kind of my prediction, because I'm just not going to blindly believe that the Boise State game plan, because as a football coach, I can look at that game plan and say, this is exactly why they were more aggressive, because of who Boise State is, because of the offense they're going to face. But now you're facing a much different animal. A team that's going to go a lot more 11 personnel, a team that's going to spread the field more, a team that's going to throw the ball more effectively, got better athletes on the perimeter. And I see them looking a lot more like they did it against Arkansas. But CJ Bailey, to me, is a better quarterback than Taylor Green. And I think the receiver talent is better than what Arkansas had. The tight end talent is better than what Arkansas had. I would argue the running back talent is the Arkansas had better depth at running back. NC State's got the better starter. And the guy that scares me a little bit more, because to your point, Trev, he can rip off big plays. He can get on the perimeter where, Mike Washington and Braylon Russell were big guys were going to more hammer you. They weren't exactly like shifty big play guys. So that's kind of where I see that. But Trev, here's my other one. If Notre Dame's defense employs a similar philosophy, not game plan, philosophy that we saw last week, then I have 45-16. And here's why I say philosophy, because the game plan that Notre Dame is going to use is not going to be like Boise State's. It can't be. You can't just like regurgitate the game plan. Like it, think of a funny scenario where Chris Ash is getting ready to go out to the game and he can't find his call sheet. So he just grabs the Boise State one and says, well, it's the same thing. We're going to be fine. No, very different formational usage, very different schemes, very different play calls, very different skill players. Not skill play like these guys weren't good. They're great. But just how Boise uses their receivers and tight end is way different than how NC State's going to use theirs. The philosophy has to be the same. Aggressive, attacking with your D-line, letting your linebackers run downhill, letting your defense play more man coverage. And now, again, still using zone. They were really effective in zone stuff against Boise, but they were a much more heavy man team against them. If they do that, Trev, I don't think this game is going to be close. I don't. And I see early in the game, I think NC State moves the ball relatively well early, because this is the type of offense that even out and out Golden coach defense or a Clark Lee coach defense or a Marcus Freeman coach defense or a Mike Elko coach defense would have needed a quarter and a half to get used to the speed of what this team can go with. That's football. Even good defenses take some time at times to say, these guys are pretty fast. We got to figure some stuff out. So I think they'll hit some big plays early, even in this new scenario. And then they hold them to field goals. That's why I go to 16. They hold them to a few field goals, and then, they'll hit a big play at some point in time to get a score, whether it sets them up for a score. But I think overall, if we see a similar philosophy to what we saw last week, I think Notre Dame, and here's why, I think Notre Dame dominates NC State in the trenches. And they don't let Hollywood Smothers take this game over, to your point, because they're going to beat them up front. Best way to make sure CJ Bailey and Hollywood Smothers don't go off, Trev, dominate them in the trenches. That's going to be the key. So that's where my two predictions are from. I have my official prediction because I am absolutely in show me mode with Chris Ash. Kind of like what you and I were going into Arkansas with Marcus Freeman, and will he, let Mike Denbrock do his thing, or will he kind of pull the reins back? He didn't. He let him go. He let him work. And when he let him work, Notre Dame rolled and Notre Dame dominated. And so if we see that defensively, hey, let's ramp this thing up. Let's go after these guys. You got a sophomore quarterback on the field. Let's go after him. That's when I think Notre Dame rolls. And there's like a lot of, 38-12, 42-13, 42-17, 41-13, 48-20. Those are all scores that will happen because the defense employs that kind of game plan. If they don't, I still like Notre Dame in this game, but I think it's going to be more of that 45-31 type of performance. So that's where I'm at on this game. But if the predictions that we're saying, if my second prediction comes true, or even your prediction comes through, Trev, where you have it 41-20, but then you have NC State scoring a late garbage touchdown, then that tells me that Chris Ash is truly turning the corner, and that's going to make me feel really good about what they're going to do in the final 6 games of the season.
Well, here's to hoping that the latter of your predictions is the correct one, because I would love to see that. You said 45-16?
I got 45 for the offense either way.
Yep.
But I have 45-16.
Love that. I love that. Well, Bryan, in order for some of these predictions, goodness gracious, to come true. Okay. I think we might just have to restart. I'm just absolutely.
We're going to start over, folks. Here we go.
Welcome back to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Brought to you by goodness gracious. So, in order for some of these predictions to come true, there we go. I was going to get it eventually. Notre Dame's going to have some game wreckers on offense and defense. Let's snake these. Let's go back and forth. Mm-hmm. I'll get us kicked off with offense. I have 3 on offense and 3 on defense, just to kind of give you a preface here. And my first one on offense is kind of a package duo, and I'm sure you know where I'm going with this one, but it's Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, but for different reasons. For Jeremiah Love, I think he can be very effective in this week's passing game. And I think Mike Denbrock has done a really good job of utilizing him in different ways, depending on the opponent that they played. We talked about how many matchups that they can take advantage of out in space. We talked about pass game ISOs against Arkansas. I don't think it's a mystery that Jeremiah Love ended the game with 5 receptions. Mm-hmm. You know, against Boise State, it was kind of, hey, this is kind of our guys versus your guys. We think that Jeremiah Love is going to be able to put in some work in the trenches and went for over 100 yards rushing. This is a game that kind of feels like an Arkansas type of game where, hey, get your athletes in space one-on-one. I talked about yesterday, Sean Brown, one of their linebackers, he's given up 20 receptions on 26 targets. For 256 receiving yards, he's given up 178 yards after the catch. And then if he's not playing, then Caden Fordham is also not great in coverage either. As a combined duo, they've given up 39 receptions for 339 receiving yards and 3 to 4 touchdowns. Not great. And so I think that you can really take advantage of Jeremiah Love in some of those situations, but Jadarian Price is one where he is going to be your impact change of pace runner, and that's something that we've seen all season long. Jadarian Price has averaged more yards per carry in every single game this season for Notre Dame outside of Purdue, where Jeremiah Love had 0.1 rushing yards more per carry than Jadarian did. So he has came in and shown that he can be that, you have Love going out in motion, getting out in space, catching passes, and then Jadarian Price can come in and be that slasher type of running back. I have those two as a package duo as my first game wreckers. Brian, what about you?
I dig it. Obviously, that's honestly just kind of like you said, insert this duo each week as potential game wreckers. But I do think in this game, it's good not to just assume they're going to be game wreckers. I think at this point in time, the offense fuels when those two guys are going.
Yeah.
And we saw that last week. CJ Carr had a bit of an off game, but they were still able to move the ball and average 7.2 yards. I mean, think about that. Your off game was 7.2 yards per play. And your longest play was only 46 yards. It's not like you had like against Indiana last year, we had a 98-yard touchdown run that kind of skewed your overall numbers. I mean, your longest play was 46. Your next longest was only 36. I mean, it wasn't like they had some cheap plays. Their efficiency on the run game was still close to 60% in the game. So like they're really finding their groove. But I'm gonna go a little bit different here, Trev, with my first one. And I'm actually going to go with a unit. You kind of do it. I'm going with a unit. I'm going with the Notre Dame offensive line. And if they're going to win this game and put up the kind of points that we're predicting, that people in the chat are predicting, this offensive line is going to have a big day. And I thought about going with Anthony Knapp because we talked about him yesterday in the matchups. I talked about maybe going with, Ashton Craig and Billy Schrouth, or maybe Ashton Craig and Gerby, or maybe just Gerby because of the Brandon Cleveland matchup that we talked about yesterday. At end of the day, I think the whole unit has to play like they're supposed to. And what happened last year against Stanford in Game 6 is you started to see the offensive line kind of figure some stuff out. There still were mistakes, and last year's line was more inexperienced than this year's line. You still had Sam Pendleton in the starting lineup. You still had true freshman Anthony Knapp in the starting lineup. Rocco was in there. Pat Coogan was in there. We didn't see Billy Schrouth come back yet. Emil was going into start number 6 for him. It was still a young unit. So you get the Anthony Knapp hold early and, a couple misses here and there. But like overall, I mean, they pushed Stanford around in that game. And they started to really find their groove. And then the next week against Georgia Tech, the line played even better. And then the next week you get Billy Schrouth back and the line really starts to take off. And that's what I'm kind of hoping that we see from this team is this offensive line just continues to ascend as opposed to just, okay, you beat up 3 bad opponents. Now let's see what you do against, some big boys or some, that type of thing. So I want to see that type of growth from them. And I think, honestly, they're going to carry this football team. If the Notre Dame offense struggles to move the ball and score, it'll be because they get beat up front. If Notre Dame hangs 40-plus points on this team, which they're more than capable of, 40 to 50 points on this team, it'll be because the offensive line comes out right away and says, hey, we're going to dominate you for 60 minutes. So good luck. Buckle up. Make sure them chin straps are buckled tight. Make sure you got your big boy pants on today because we're about to put in some work. And so that's my number one game records is we're going to look back. If Notre Dame does what we think they can do in this game, you picked 41 points. I picked 45. People in the chat picking in the 40s. It's because the offensive line said, we got this. And Jeremiah and Jadarian aren't getting touched until they get to the second level, which is what happens when this team has really worked. They're getting into this, they're getting into holes, open holes with one guy to beat, and they're making a miss because the offensive line is putting in that work. If they do that, I'm going to feel really good about their chances of scoring a lot of points and winning this football game. So I'm going to go O-line number one. Who else you got on offense, Trev?
Next one on offense, FanDuel actually has set for receiving yards at over under 28.5, which if I were a betting man, which I am, I would think would be extremely, extremely juicy. And I'm talking about tight end Eli Raridan. We've talked about him all week. One, I'm shocked that his over-under is set at 28.5. Kind of understand it because he's somewhat cooled off, I guess you could say, after his back-to-back over 80-yard performances against Miami and Texas A&M. But we talked about the matchups for this game and how they can really take advantage of when Eli Raridan's to the field, they'll put linebacker Sean Brown on him. And when he's to the boundary, they'll put a 5'9" safety and Ronnie Royal on him. I think those are matchups that Mike Denbrock is going to be willing to take advantage of. And we have also seen C.J. Carr very comfortable targeting Eli Raridan in this offense. Think that there's a good chance down in the red zone, especially if Ronnie Royal is on him, that Eli Raridan could come down with his first touchdown catch of the season. Malachi Fields has shown that he's a red zone target. Jordan Faison has shown that he's just really between the 20s target if you think about it. That guy is somebody that's ripping off comeback routes, dig routes, things like it's his job because it is. Eli Raridan is somebody that I think could have a really big game. So my second game wrecker, going with the tight ends to the surprise of nobody, I have Eli Raridan as my second game record. Brian, what about you?
I would have honestly been disappointed with you if you didn't have him in there this week, Trev. We might have had to say, man, I don't know what your deal is, but we haven't heard you talk about Eli Raridan enough in the last few games. I think you're spot on. And the reason I would have been disappointed because I think there's a lot to that. I'm kind of thinking bigger picture here this week, Trev, as opposed to zeroing in on like this guy here, this guy there. And that basically is I thought about Malachi. I think Malachi could have a big game. I thought about Jordan Faison. He could just keep doing what he does. Hopefully Will Pauling can improve on some things and have a better performance. Maybe Micah Gilbert gets in there, Eli Raridan. But I'm going with the trigger man. I'm going with the point guard. I'm going with C.J. Carr. Because if C.J. Carr is the quarterback that I think he is, he will bounce back well from last week. That doesn't mean he's going to play a perfect game, but I think mentally he's going to bounce back. He'll still have some redshirt freshman throws and some redshirt freshman mistakes because he's a redshirt freshman. But I think that he's not going to put so much pressure on himself to go out there and be perfect all the time because of how he played last week that it then snowballs and becomes a second bad game. I think CJ is going to come out and play well. I do think he's going to throw a pick in this game. He hasn't thrown a pick since second game of the year. Picks are going to happen. I think he's going to probably try to force a ball, and then that's just going to kind of piss him off, and he's going to come out the next two series and just rip NC State up. That's kind of what he's done this season. Is after I think they've scored a touchdown on each of the next drives after he's thrown a pick this year, I believe. Am I correct on that? I know he did against Texas A&M, but I thought he did against Miami as well. I have to go.
I know it was a scoring drive, but I don't remember if it was a field goal drive or a touchdown drive.
Nick, let's see here. I'm going to go look that up. So after the interception, they had a field goal. So field goal, then touchdown. So he's led them to points after his two interceptions the last two times. So I just think he's going to be really good in this game and just distribute the ball all over the place. I think it's going to be Malachi's going to get his, Faison's going to get his, Pauling's going to get his, Love's going to get his, Price might even get some work in there. Raridan's going to get his. I hope that him and Micah Gilbert can connect because he had Micah Gilbert torched the Boise State corner on the last play of the game. And if CJ gets the ball out a little quicker and leads him a little bit more, that's a touchdown. So hopefully they can get that one back out. But yeah, I just think this is going to be a day where CJ Carr is dealing. I really do. That's kind of my two big picture ones, Trev. And I think a byproduct of that is some of the pass catchers and skill players having a big day. You got anybody else in your game wreckers prediction?
Last one is Ashton Craig for he'll be matched up head up against Brandon Cleveland throughout the game. It won't be every single snap. That's one that I'm going to be keeping my eye on. Ashton Craig has been steady this season, and he's put on a really good performance. And it's not surprising. We talked about him when he returned back healthy and when he was deemed the starting center for Notre Dame to start the season. That we're talking about somebody who hasn't allowed a sack in the 6 games that he started. And some of those were impactful games. Texas A&M 2024, bowl game in 2023. Came in against Clemson in 2023 when Zeke Correll got hurt and didn't allow a sack. And so he's only allowed 1 sack this year against Texas A&M, no hits on the quarterback, only 8 total pressures all year. But he's going to be tested because he hasn't had that many players play head up on him. And Brandon Cleveland, you are going to get his best. I know that's a cliche, but like we talked about earlier in the week, Brian, when the lights are the brightest, I understand the game's getting kicked off at 3:30, but when you're playing on a national stage and you're trying to put some NFL film out there, you show what you're able to do against Notre Dame offensive line. So Ashton Craig is going to have to prepare to get Brandon Cleveland's best. I think he's going to have a big game in the run and pass protection. That's going to be huge in both phases. So my last one on offense is Ashton Craig. Let's talk a little defense, Brian. And again, this is going to be the side of the ball it's going to dictate how we're going to feel going into the USC week. At least that's how it is for me. I'm not sure how it is for you, but depending on how the defense performs on Saturday will dictate my mood Monday through Friday next week.
If they like, we kind of go back to the predictions thing, Trev. If they look like they looked last week philosophically, I'm going to feel a lot better about next weekend. If they look like they look against Arkansas, I'm not going to feel as good.
No.
Well, hold on. They scored 13 points against Notre Dame. I get that. But as we've talked about, Arkansas missed a lot of opportunities. And the reality is Arkansas, in my opinion, was the best offense Notre Dame has faced so far. Just as far as what they did, scheme, design, and all that kind of stuff. And, I mean, in Miami's 2 games against good teams, scored 27 and 28 points. They're a good offense. They're not a great offense. Texas A&M looked like a great offense against Notre Dame, but they haven't been a great offense against anybody else this season. They're 42nd in scoring right now. Arkansas, to me, is the best offense they face, but they don't have the athletes that NC State or USC have. And a receiver. Very similar style of quarterback to varying talent degrees and experience levels, but receiving core is much better. And so if the philosophy is right, I'll feel a lot better. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this unit is going to perform very much. And as we kind of do every week, it's going to start up front. And I'm going to go something a little bit different this week, Trev. I'm going to go with we've done a lot like Boubacar and different guys, and I got kind of 2 game wreckers that I got my eye on for this game. The first one is Bryce Young, and it just seems to me like we've seen in the past a lot of times when a Notre Dame player gets to play like one of his home state schools, he just tends to kind of have his breakout performance, and we've just kind of seen that a little bit. And I look at Bryce Young being from North Carolina, playing NC State. He hasn't really had that breakout game yet, but I think the last 3 weeks he's kind of gotten better each week, and I think a breakout's coming. And I think there's going to be a lot of tension on Boubacar. There's going to be a lot of attention on the D tackles, but I think Bryce Young is a guy that I think is going to have a little bit of that breakout performance this week. I think this is the week we see Bryce have that really flashy, get after. He's going to have his hands full because that left tackle for Jacarius Peak for NC State school players only giving up 4 pressures all year. But I think Bryce is going to have a big game. Run game, setting the edge, being effective against the run, getting pressure on CJ Bailey. I think all those things are going to be a factor for Bryce this week. So I've got Bryce Young as my game wrecker for the Notre Dame defensive line.
I like that. I'm also going to work front to back, and I'm also going with an edge rusher, but I am going to go with Boubacar Traore. He's been sniffing around that impact game. He's been far and away their best and most consistent defensive end this season, but he hasn't had that like performance yet, where we sit back in the postgame, it's like, there he is. Like play here, a drive here. We talk about how good he's been in the run game, which has been really promising. But I'm waiting for Boubacar to have that game where it's like, he ends the day with 6-7 total pressures, a couple hits on the quarterback, couple sacks. I think he has that opportunity in front of him because their right tackle has given up the most pressures that they've allowed all season. He's given up 14. When you're going up against an edge rusher like Boubacar Traore, that doesn't really bode well. If you go back and turn on the film, which, Ryan, I know that you have, Boubacar was getting into the backfield pretty consistently against Boise State. Now you just have to finish. And I think this is the game that he puts it all together and finishes and comes away with a pretty gaudy-looking stat line. So my first one on the defensive line is Boubacar Traore.
He has a very weird stat line so far on PFF. And during the bye week, I'm going to try to go back over the first 7 games and kind of do my own pressure numbers, Trev. So you and I will actually talk about that. But he is third on the defense in total pressures, according to PFF, with 10. I kind of feel like he has more than that. That's partly why I want to go back and break it down a little bit. But when you look at Boubacar's numbers, he's got 10. Do you know who's tied for the team lead? And you know the answer to that. I think you know the answer to this because you've looked at it. But it's the 2 guys tied for the team lead in pressures are Bryce Young and Donovan Hinish. Donovan Hinish doesn't surprise me because he had like 7 a couple weeks ago. So, and we've seen him get pressures on the quarterback. But Bryce being at 14 surprised me a little bit. I know he had 5 last week, and so he obviously had a good game last week, but he had 4 against A&M, 2 against Arkansas. But Donovan Hinish only has, if you look at that, here's the part that's odd. Of the 14 pressures for Bryce Young, 4 have resulted in a sack or a hit, according to PFF. Of Donnie's 14 pressures, only 3 have resulted in a sack or a hit. Kingston Williams is tied with Boubacar for third. Only 1 of his pressures has resulted in a sack or a hit. Of Boubacar's 10 pressures, 7 have resulted in a sack or hit on the quarterback. And you look at that and you're like, dude, that's a pretty impressive number. And you're like, at the end of the year, like that's pretty good production, if you look at it. And so according to their numbers, I mean, he's basically on pace to have 11, 12 sacks by the time you get to your first bowl game. So but I also agree with you that the film doesn't show a guy that's that dominant yet, but you see a guy that's really close to it. So what I think we'll see is, the pressure numbers go up more than just he hits home. But part of that too has been also on Chris Ash. Because we've seen snaps, Trev, where Boubacar destroys the guy he's going against, and he doesn't get in close to the quarterback because it's catch the shotgun, one drop, quick gather, bam, ball's out, and he has no shot. I keep thinking of that snap against Purdue. You and I were looking at it as we were watching the All-22. But there's that play where Boubacar comes off wide and just spins inside of the Purdue offensive tackle and just destroys him. Last week, he would have had 3 sacks on that move if it was the way that the coverage played. And you just kind of get frustrated by it because you're like, dude, that's a great pass rush that you just wasted with your soft coverage. If Boubacar and or Bryce have the number 1 game record performance, I think that bodes very well for this defense because I don't think they can have it without Chris Ash employing a game plan that looks similar to last week. I don't. What do you think?
No, we see that the same. It's about marrying up the coverage in the front. That's something that's been a hot topic of conversation in a lot of Marcus Freeman's press conferences really since the start of the season. Chris Ash is going to have to do everything he can from a back-end standpoint to help support his pass rush to get home. Because you can, to your point, you can have the best pass rushing move, and you can have an arsenal of moves in your tool belt. But if a quarterback is getting the ball out in under a second, it doesn't really matter. It just doesn't. So I agree with you completely, Brian. Who's your next game wrecker? I know you have Bryce Young. Who else you got?
I'm going linebacker level next, Trev, and I'm going Drake Bowen. I think Drake is another guy that's just been kind of steadily getting closer and closer and closer to that big breakout game. I also think when him and Kingston are on the field together, it makes them both better. I just think it elevates the two of them. And again, a lot of what's funny is my prediction is based on Chris Ash not doing what he needs to do. My game records are predicted off of him doing what he needs to do. So if my game records are correct, it means Chris Ash is doing what he needs to do, and my score prediction will be wrong. But I think Drake was more impactful last week than a lot of people realize. You go back and break down the game, he was very impactful last week. And I think we're going to see that again. I think they're using him downhill a lot more. He even blitzed a little bit more against Arkansas, even though, he wasn't as consistently allowed to pass rush as much as I would personally like. But Drake in 5 games has 7 pressures, Trevor, and 3 sacks plus hits on the quarterback, which means he's on pace to top what he did last year. Now he's also being used to pressure a lot more than he has, and he was used to, according to Pro Football Focus, pass rushed 14 times against Boise State. His previous high was 7 against Miami, and last year the highest he had last year was 13 against USC, and he had no pressures in that game. So you just look at his usage there. And last week he rushed 14 times, but he had 3 pressures, including 2 sacks. So he got to the quarterback twice in that game. And the way that PFF does it, if 2 guys get to the quarterback and get like a half a sack in the official statistics, it counts as a sack in PFF. So like when Kingston and Drake both got to the quarterback, I know you know this, Trev. I'm explaining this to the audience. They counted as 1 sack for each guy. So a lot of times you'll see like 7, 8 sacks. And you're like, Notre Dame only got like 4 sacks in that game. Yeah, but they counted halves in that. So that's kind of how that factored in. But I just think Drake's going to have a big game. Him and Hollywood Smothers is going to be having some bad dreams about the Notre Dame linebackers, I feel. And I think CJ Bailey's going to get planted by Drake a couple times as well. So I think Drake Bowen's my next game wrecker, especially if we see more of him and Kingston on the field together. I just think that duo, they seem to have and this doesn't mean I don't want to see Jaden Osbury. I love Jaden Osbury. He had 8. He tied for the team leading tackles last week with 8. He's a heck of a player, but it just seems to be when Drake and Kingston are on the field, they play off each other really well. They communicate really well. Their timing together on pressures is really good. I just think those 2 kids just have sort of that. I think of the movie Miracle and the hockey movie, and you've just got the cone heads or whatever. They just, for whatever reason, just had that flow together. They just played well together. You've got those basketball duos where it's like, just I'm looking here throwing lobs and the other guy knows I'm doing it and he's banging it. That's just how I feel and it goes back to last year, Trev. I've been saying this for a while, like those 2 guys need to be on the field together. It's just different when they're on the field together. And if we see more of that, I think that's going to help continue to elevate Drake's game as well. But he's just steadily been getting better and better and better every year, or every game this season. And I think he has a big game as well for Notre Dame. What say you about your next?
I appreciate you taking Drake Bowen kind of out of the loop, because I had written down as my second one Kingston or Drake. And you explained as to why for Drake Bowen. I agree with everything you said. I'm going to go with Kingston Viliamasa. One, for the reasons that you talked about they're just a really good duo when they're on the field together. But I think Kingston's skill set is going to be utilized heavily in this game as an edge rusher and as a box linebacker. Hollywood Smothers is a good running back, and I've been talking about him all week. You don't average 6.9 yards a carry carrying the ball 100 times for no reason. It's a good running back. And I understand some people see the logo on the helmet, the name on the jersey, he plays for NC State. If he's better, he'd go somewhere else. Well, I know what he's doing at NC State. And he has 693 rushing yards, 5 touchdowns, and is averaging 6.9 yards per carry. Kingston Viliamaasa's skill set is going to be suited extremely well in this game. I think he's also going to be able to give CJ Bailey some headaches. Yesterday in Keys to Victory, we talked about making him uncomfortable. We have seen quarterbacks when 27 is lined up in the A-gap, even showing pressure, starts to speed up a quarterback's internal clock a little bit. Opposing offenses circle number 27 on the scouting report every week. You could tell because quarterbacks' internal clock starts to get sped up a little bit. And I understand, too, mine would be, too, if I saw Kingston Viliamasa lining up to send me some pressure up the A-gap as well. But I think that he's going to have a couple of big hits in this game. I just feel like this is one where the defense, and again, this is sticking along the lines of ideally Chris Ash lets this defense be who they are supposed to be. But I just feel like this defense is going to be flying around on Saturday, and 27 is going to come away with some really, really big hits.
Dude, I really
think so.
I really hope that they're more aggressive this week, dude. I really do.
Yeah,
I really do. We'll see. We'll see.
Here's hoping.
Back end, I think we both have the same guy here, Christian Gray. Christian Gray is going to be a game wrecker in this game. He's going to be. The question is going to be, who does it favor, NC State or Notre Dame? And because they're going to go at him. They're going to go at him, and if he doesn't play well, they're going to beat him. And if he plays well, he's going to be a major impact on this game, possibly. And keep in mind, a field cornerback is going to give up more catches than a boundary cornerback, more often than not, if they're both very good. So Christian's going to give up some completions. That's part of the game. I keep reminding people that, if you look at Leonard Moore last year, the game where he allowed the most receptions against him last year was the Louisville game. And that just so happened to be the game where he played field cornerback. Gave up 6 of 7 targets in that game for 60 yards. Most completions he's I believe still to this day ever allowed in a game. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it happened when he was playing field corner. So it's just the nature of it. But a good field corner, when he's on, is also going to make a lot of plays. And for Christian, that doesn't just mean in coverage. It means obviously breaking up passes, maybe a big interception, but it also means when they're running the outside, when they're doing their outside runs, when they're showing outside screens, when they're using their perimeter pass game, you've got to be a strong tackler as well. The thing that encouraged me about Christian last week, he's much more physical than we had seen him just as a tackler and in route. And he wasn't, like you pointed out, that play against Chris Marshall, where he was in phase. And what we've seen from Christian most of the second half of last year and the first few games of this year is he would then immediately, he's in phase and he'll just start grabbing the jersey, start reaching for it. He didn't. He stayed right there in phase, kept his hands on the body, and then was in position to, force the guy to push off because he was in position to shoot his hands and, maybe break up the pass. So I think Christian Gray is going to have a big impact in this game. And look, I think you could point to any secondary player. I could see Dallas Golden having a big game. I could see Tay obviously having a big game. Don Schuler, Leonard Moore, obviously. But I think Christian Gray is the one I'm going with because it's going to happen. It just, we don't know which side. Is it going to be a game wrecker because he wrecked the game because he got beat a lot? Or is it going to be a game wrecker because he plays the way we know he's capable of playing? And he's gotten better. The last 2 weeks, he's been better and better. And I was more encouraged by last week's performance even than I was Arkansas, even though you could argue he played better against Arkansas than he did against Boise State because he's just a more natural boundary receiver. We saw that against Arkansas. Like, that's when Christian's really in his element. As a field corner, he's not always as comfortable. But he played field last week. Because remember, he played boundary against Arkansas because Leonard Moore was out. But last week, as a field guy, he played very well. It looked like the early part of last year version of Christian Gray. Confident, driving on the ball, tackling well, you not getting grabby in coverage. And I think we're going to see that again. So I'm predicting that he's going to be a game wrecker in a positive way. I'm simply saying that, but it's going to happen one way or the other because if he doesn't play well, he's going to get beat a lot because I'm quite confident that NC State's going to go at him. I mean, you have to pick your poison when you're going against a team like Notre Dame. Like, okay, well, yeah, I mean, we love Noah Rogers and Terrell Anderson, but we're also not stupid, and we're not going to throw the ball 10 times at Leonard Moore. Because like that hasn't worked out for people the last couple of years. And I don't know if I want to go at that number 9 because he's been like this close to picking off a pass in each of the last 3, like multiple passes in each of the last 3 games. And that number 8, I don't know if I want to get my receivers drilled by that guy. Well, let's give number 6 a try because he's been so up and down. So I think Dallas and Christian are both going to get targeted a lot in this game. And how they perform is going to go a long way towards how well Notre Dame plays on defense.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said. Christian Gray was my game wrecker in the secondary by default. They would look. I have a lot of respect for what NC State has done on offense this year. They would be dumb to try to go after Leonard Moore repeatedly. Just is what it is at the end of the day. I think he's the best cover corner in college football. And I think his performance against Boise State kind of helped remind people of that fact. So I think Christian Gray is going to have a big day. Just depends on for who. And obviously, we are both predicting it to be in favor of the Fighting Irish. But folks, that's going to do it for part one of today's show. Don't go anywhere, because the rest of today's show, we're just talking ball, talking about this awesome slate of college football games that are going on this weekend. But before we get there, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the CFB Nation channel. Vince and I are going live tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern time for the next installment of the Spread Option. You're not going to want to miss that one. Also, make sure you have this notification bell hit on whatever streaming platform you listen to us on. We'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. You're muted, Brian.
I got to say, before we cut to the next section, I got to say this. I am shocked that you didn't try to speed race or us through the game predictions. Shocked. Because I know how fired up Trev is to get to this next segment. I'm like, yeah, okay, 45-21, Brian. I think it's going to be a good game. Defense is going to be good. What say you? All right, cool. How about game record, Trev? I'm going here. What do you think? Hey, Trev, man, slow down, brother. Like we got to do a show here, man. I know. I just want to get to these big games. He is so fired up about that. I'm fired up about that. But I just had to say that I'm proud of you for staying to the script, staying to the outline, because I thought you were going to be speed racing us through that, because I know how fired up you are to get to these games, man. So I just had to get that little razz out there, my man. I had to get that out there.
I appreciate it. I have my moments.
Yeah,
I have my moments.
You have lots of good moments.
They happen once in a while, but I appreciate you as always. All right, Brian, in part two of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by FanDuel, we are talking college football because, look, man, this is a fun slate of games. I thought that, week one was going to be a fun slate. You had Ohio State, Texas, you had Alabama, Florida State, you had Clemson, LSU, but you fast forward to October 11th, and this slate of games is going to be a lot of fun to talk about, man. This is a big weekend in college football. A lot of different implications. Huge. Now we're getting into playoff implications, conference title implications. This is the bulk of the season. And just to put the icing on the cake, it's finally fall weather outside. It's not 80 degrees anymore. I made some soup yesterday. It's fall, baby. I'm juiced up. I'm absolutely juiced up.
I made some chili last week, so I've been having chili every day because I usually make a lot of it so I can have it for lunch. But yeah, it's that time, bro. It's that time.
Well, let's dive into some of these games here, and we're going to go in order of kickoff time. So we're obviously starting with the noon games, then we'll hit some of the 3:30 games, and then dive into the evening. And we have 5 games that we're going to take a deep dive into before we get to some other games. Keep your eye out on. And the first one is a massive matchup in the Big Ten between the number 1 Ohio State Buckeyes and the number 17 Illinois Fighting Illini. Kickoff time is at 12 p.m. on Fox, and right now on FanDuel, Ohio State is favored by 14.5 points. The over-under, though, is set at 49.5. Those are some interesting numbers there, Brian. But Buckeyes travel to Champaign, Illinois to take on the Fighting Illini. This is going to be a good one.
Yeah, it is, Trev. I mean, this is a very fascinating matchup because they used to play almost every year. Like in the 2000s and 2010s, they play almost every year. They haven't played since 2017. This is 8 years since they've played the last time. Ohio State's won 9 straight. The last time Illinois won this game was back in 2007. And the last time, here's a little nugget for you, Trev. The last time these two teams played when they were both ranked was 2001. So it's been a minute. It's been a minute. And this is a matchup that Ohio State has clearly dominated. 9 straight wins in this series, and it's a big game for Illinois because for me, Trev, it's one of those games where there's some separation here starting to happen in the Big Ten with some of these matchups that are going to be coming up. And this is one of those matchups where Illinois came into the season, I think, with an idea of thinking, hey, we've got a shot to be a playoff team. We've got to, maybe not win the Big Ten, but you could finish in the top 4 to 5 of the Big Ten, and you got a shot to make it to the college football playoff. And so you've got this team. They've got the big win over USC, but then they have that blowout loss to Indiana. And so it's kind of like, well, what version of this Illinois team is going to show up? And you say, well, like, and then you look at Ohio State and you say, okay, well, yeah, they scored a lot of points last week, but Minnesota's not very good. And overall, they haven't really been scoring a lot of points this season. And so they've been relying on defense and ground and pound and kind of, slowing the game down, limiting possessions. Well, last week, we got a chance to see Julian saying light it up a little bit against a legitimate opponent. I mean, Minnesota's not like this great team, like, oh my gosh, what a great win, but that's a solid football team. And Julian saying lit him up, threw for over 300 yards. And so you're like, okay, is this like welcome to the 2025 season moment for the Ohio State offense? Or is it just kind of like, well, they're not very good? And so that's kind of what we're going to find out a lot about that this weekend, Trevor, is, I think Illinois' got a good defense. I don't think they're as bad as they were against Indiana, but I think we've kind of seen what the kind of looks like against Indiana in USC. It's a good defense, but it's not as athletic on the back end as it was a couple of years ago when they had just an elite secondary. It's not that, and they can be vulnerable. But for Ohio State, it's like, but are you going to use your weapons in a way that can exploit where you have some of those matchup advantages? And so, but at the end of the day, I think that this matchup is going to come down to saying, like, okay, the winner of this game puts themselves firmly in the position of being a contender for the Big Ten championship. And the loser of this game is going to be in a situation where they're going to have to, they're now in like a position where, okay, you can't lose, you can't lose another game, or you may still be a playoff team, but you're not going to get in if you're Ohio State. But for Illinois, you lose this game and it's kind of like, okay, your shot at being a playoff team is kind of over, because this is loss number 2. And the rest of your schedule is Washington, Rutgers, Maryland, Wisconsin, Northwestern, at Washington, at Wisconsin. You may win a bunch of those games, but what's the resume builder that you have to get in? And it'd be comparable to, it's kind of comparable to what Indiana's schedule was like last year, where Indiana lost to the only good team they played. In this instance, Illinois would have lost to both of the good teams they played. I don't think Indiana gets in last year 10-2. They needed to be 11-1. And I don't think Illinois is going to have that juice. So it's a big game for both teams. There's no doubt about it. But I want to know, can Illinois even hang in this game, Trev? That's the question for me.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to come down to how well Luke Altmaier performs against this Ohio State defense. This has been the side of the ball that has surprised me the most. I said it in the preseason. I've never once been shocked about Ohio State's offense and their ability to put points on the board and move the ball. What I didn't know was, how are they going to replace 8 starters on defense with a new defensive coordinator who hasn't coached in college since 2004 when he was a grad assistant for Syracuse? And they've shown me. I think the interesting matchup in this one is, talking about Luke Altmaier's performance. Every game this season except for 2. So in 4 of the 6 games that Illinois has played, Luke Altmaier has gone for over 200 passing yards. He didn't know against Indiana, and then he didn't against Western Michigan. That was more just they were winning 38-0, and he didn't have to. Ohio State's defense is yet to allow a 200-yard passer this season.
Yeah.
And this defense has shown that you can't just line up in 12 personnel and run it on them. That's something that Minnesota found out. That's something that Texas found out. Quarterback has to be a difference maker in this game. Can Luke Altmaier be that guy?
Right.
And I think that's a very valid question, because so far a lot of people have been in. And Illinois is, I don't want to discredit them. I think they're a good football team. I think that they are an upper middle tier Big Ten team. I don't think they're in the middle tier of the Big Ten.
Yeah.
But you just kind of look at what they've done this year. And it's like, okay, you had your opportunity against IU. You get the doors blown off of you.
You just needed it to be close. That's it. You just
Literally.
needed to be a 7 to 10 point game. That's all you needed in that game.
You get the doors blown off of you. You beat USC at home, which is a good win because USC was ranked 21st in the country at the time, but you did it against a team that historically does not play well when they travel east. And so it's just kind of like, okay, what is this Illinois team? I think even some of the AP voters, I don't, not to say to give them credit, but you even look at how they've been in the AP rankings. They started the season off 12th in the preseason with all the chaos in college football. A month of college football went on when a lot of craziness was happening. And they went from 12th to 9th. Because it's just kind of like, what is this team? They moved up kind of more by default, because they definitely didn't move up, because of who they beat before they played IU. And then you lose by 53 points. That's a rough look. And so this is a huge game for the Illini because it's their opportunity to show, hey, we are one of those teams in the Big Ten surging to pass by some other teams. And that's going to be really interesting to see how that goes down.
So when you look at it, Trev, what's it mean? What does this game mean for Ohio State? It just means you keep doing what you're doing. You just keep dominating. And I want to throw a little nugget in there too, Trev. You talk about, well, Ohio State hasn't allowed a 200-yard passer, and you could say, well, I mean, who have they really played that throws the ball? Arch has kind of struggled all year. Well, Damon Williams in his other 4 games has thrown for 226 yards because he didn't throw as much the second half, 9.4 yards per attempt. He threw for 254 against UC Davis, 298 against Washington State on 19 attempts. And the week after playing Ohio State, they went on the road. He completed 68% of his passes for 275 yards and 2 touchdowns. Against Ohio State, he went for 173. And they kept him in check. And rushing-wise, Damon Williams has gone for 68 yards, 64 yards, 88 yards, 54 yards. Against Ohio State, he was minus 28. Drake Lindsey was coming off of a 324-yard, 3-touchdown performance against Rutgers the week before. Threw for 205 against Cal, threw for 290 against Buffalo. He went 15 of 26 for 94 yards against Ohio State. So, yeah. It's not just that they have they played, and Luke Altmaier is more in the Drake Lindsey type of, talent. He's not, okay, they're facing a Russell Wilson, that kind of thing. It's not that. And so, but for Ohio State, Trev, it's just keep rolling. That's what's at stake. There's a lot more at stake for Illinois. If Ohio State can lose this game and they win out, they're fine. They're hosting, there might be a top 4 seed. Plenty of big wins left on their resume. They've got Penn State coming up. They've got Michigan coming up. They'll be in the Big Ten title game if they win out, and they'll probably play like an Oregon or an Indiana, one of those 2 teams. So Ohio State has much more of a grace period if they lose, but this allows them to hold firm to the number 1 seed and allows them some momentum because, they've got Wisconsin next week. And look, let's be real about something, Trev. I think you're going to agree with me on this. Ohio State could play a C- D+ game against Wisconsin and win by double digits at Wisconsin. I mean, they could. Then they have a bye week. Then they get Penn State at home. Then they're at Purdue, home against UCLA, home against Rutgers, at Michigan. So if they get through Illinois with a win, if they lose to Illinois, they've got 2 tough games left. Everything else is winnable. And I think that the Penn State game obviously is incredibly winnable because James Franklin doesn't win big games. And until proven otherwise. So I think for Ohio State, there's not as much pressure on them if we're talking playoffs. For Illinois, you've got to win this game. I would say worst case, this needs to be a 4-quarter ball game where they look back and the committee says, look, they beat USC. They took Ohio State down to the wire. That was an anomaly game. We're going to forgive them for the Indiana game. And then maybe then a 10-2 Illinois gets in over a 9-3 SEC team or a 9-3 Big 12 team or a 9-3 Big 10 team. But it's going to be a lot tougher to be a playoff team if you don't win this game, and if it's not close. So I think for Illinois, I don't think they necessarily need to win to be a playoff team, but they can't get whooped. That's the big thing for them. So, but it does pretty much eliminate them, in my opinion, from Big 10 title contention because I just don't see between Oregon and Ohio State and Indiana, I just don't see 2 of those teams losing 2 games. And that's what they would need is 2 of them to lose 2 games. And I just don't see it. One of them is going to have a loss this weekend. But if you don't hand Ohio State one of those losses, because then if Ohio State still loses 2, they're still in because they won the tiebreaker. If Indiana loses 2, they're still in. So now you'd need Oregon. Actually, matter of fact, they can't get in if it comes down to Oregon, Indiana, and Ohio State because Ohio State and Indiana would both knock them out. So then they'd need 3. So your chances of getting into the Big Ten title game go way down if you lose this game. Ohio State still controls their own destiny 100% with a loss this weekend. So that's why I think there's a lot more pressure on Illinois from a Big Ten title and playoff standpoint than Ohio State.
Agreed. This is all the pressure's on, all eyes are on Brett Bielema and the Fighting Illini. I agree with you 100%.
That still sounds weird because whenever somebody says Brett Bielema, I still immediately turn into Wisconsin.
Sure.
Yeah.
I get that. I get you. Brian, let's talk some predictions.
Yep.
Or did you have?
Nope. That's it. That's it.
Right on. I'll get us kicked off. I have Ohio State winning this one 31-17. It goes back to some of the reasons that I talked about with Illinois. I just don't know how bought in I am to Illinois, if I'm just being 100% honest. Like I don't know what to expect from them. Like I said, they had a good win against USC at home. USC shown they can't travel out east. And we've been talking about it at some point before last weekend. We said at some point this Ohio State offense is going to start clicking. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately for Illinois, I think that light bulb moment kind of went on against Minnesota at home, a middle of the road Big Ten team.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to take the Buckeyes in this one. Defensively, they've been really, really good. I don't see Illinois being able to crack that 20-point margin just because this defense has been electric. So I'm going Buckeyes 31-17.
They're going to have to find a way to pressure Julian Sand consistently, and I just don't know that they're capable of it. I gave you a funny look because I was like, is he about to take my score? Because you said 31, and I was like, he's about to take my score. I am actually 31-13. I think Illinois is going to really struggle to move the ball on Ohio State. This defense is legit. I mean, their D-line hasn't really missed a beat. Their linebackers are even better than they were last year. With all due respect to Cody Simon, Arvell Reese is a stud. Their secondary is better than it was last year. And we said that the way Denzel Burke played last year, I think they could be better at corner, especially if Davidson Igbinosun can stop holding so much. And you know what? He's done a pretty good job of that so far. Now, the one thing I'll say is we haven't really seen him play like a big-time receiving core, because I don't think Texas is a big-time receiving core. Said that in the preseason, especially without Emmett Mosley. I just don't think Illinois has a shot. I'm still not completely bought into the Ohio State offense being what it was last week, and I think Illinois has better athletes than what Minnesota has on defense, so I'm not quite there yet, but I think I think once Ohio State gets a lead, I think you're going to see them kind of, okay, let's run it down their throat and get out of here with a win. So I'm going 31-13 in a game that I don't think is ever going to be overly competitive, Trev.
We see that the same. Brian, next game, we're taking a trip to the SEC. Top 15 SEC matchup between the number 8 Crimson Tide, who are on the road against the undefeated number 14 Missouri Tigers, in what will be their 6th straight home game. Kickoff is at 12 p.m. on ABC. Alabama is currently favored on FanDuel by 3.5. The over-under is set at 52.5. Interesting matchup here, Brian.
It is, man. This is going to be a very interesting game, Trev. And just some particulars about this game. Alabama's 5-0 against Missouri since they joined the SEC, and all of them have been blowouts. Both of these teams were ranked when they played last year in Tuscaloosa. Alabama was ranked 15th. Missouri's ranked 21st. And Alabama won 34-0. And look, this is the are you for real or not game for both of them. I think that's what's intriguing about this, Trev, is because I still think there's some people that are I even hear there's still some people like, I'm not completely sold on Alabama yet. I'm like, what else do they need to do? They went into Athens and beat Georgia. I don't know. They just beat Vanderbilt by 16, 17 points. Like, what else does this team need to do to make you a believer? I mean, I get Saban's not there anymore, but the guy that's there now played for the title game 2 years ago. What do they need to do? But, well, okay, here's what you need to do. Go into Columbia and beat Missouri on the road. Okay, fine. All right, let's see what they can do. For Missouri, you're ranked 14th despite being an undefeated SEC team. Like, there's no way LSU, Bama, Georgia, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, none of those teams are going to be Florida, Tennessee. None of those teams are going to be undefeated and ranked 14th. So there's still that, you got to show me something to this game for Missouri. So look, there's SEC supremacy at play here, Trev, because there's a lot of teams right now. You talked about this. I think it was a mailbag question this week, and you were talking about, like, dude, I have no idea, because we were asked, who do we think is going to play for the conference championships? And you were like, I'll just go with these two teams because I kind of had them preseason, but, like, I don't have a clue because we haven't really dove deep into SEC play just yet. And now we are. I mean, there's some teams that have played 3 conference games. There's other teams that only played 1 or 2. And there's 5 undefeated teams in the league, including Bama and Missouri. There are 7 teams in the SEC with only 1 conference loss right now. I mean, unless you're Auburn or Kentucky, everybody else is kind of still in it at this point in time. And so this is one of those opportunities for these 2 teams to kind of make a statement, first and foremost, about just getting to the SEC championship game. I think that's the biggest thing for me. And then can Alabama's run defense, which I think has been a little shaky, you're going against the leading rusher in college football, and who also has a quarterback that can hurt you with his legs. I think it's going to be a fascinating matchup. And it's a matchup that says, okay, are you for real? Either team, we're going to find that out in this game.
That's what I'm the most interested to see. I am of the people that think that Alabama is here and here to stay. Missouri is the team for me that has something to prove. Because sorry, go ahead.
Was the Georgia game the one that kind of put you over the top that says, okay, I'm on board, this Bama team's legit, or was it last week against Vandy with the back-to-back?
It was last week against Vanderbilt, because there was a part of me after the Alabama game that's like, okay, what was it more? Was it just the fact that Kirby Smart just can't beat Alabama?
Fair.
Or was it Alabama's kind of here to stay? There was inklings of like, okay, this Alabama team is legit, but some coaches and some programs just have those teams that they just can't fit. Like Tennessee, Georgia. No matter how good Tennessee looks on paper, they just can't slay that dragon that is Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart just can't slay that dragon, whether it's now at home, away, in the SEC championship, or what have you. The only time he did it was when Jamison Williams got hurt and John Mechie got hurt in the postseason. So it's like, okay, what takes the cake? But the way that they showed up against Vanderbilt, because I talked about how Alabama is on upset alert. Yes, you can play the strings of, Alabama remembers what happens last year. It's like, so does Vandy.
Yep.
Vandy knows that you are no longer this invincible power, and the name Alabama doesn't strike fear into the people's hearts like it used to when Nick Saban was there. Diego Pavia knew that. Clark Lee knew that. So the Vanderbilt win was that win for me to show me that Alabama was backing on that trend. But Missouri is the team that has to show me a little something. They've been impressive this season against teams that are just flat out not that great. You put up 61 against Central Arkansas, 42 against Kansas at home in a game. I mean, Kansas has been very disappointing this season, especially on defense. You hang 52 on Louisiana, and then you get into SEC play. You play your first SEC opponent at home. You win by 9 against a South Carolina team that has not been what people thought that they would be this year. Still a good win for Missouri, not to discredit it, but you're going from 61-6, 42-31, 52-10. 29-20 when you play a team that has a relative pulse. And then you have UMass also at home, and you win 42-6. So Missouri has a lot on their plate this game.
So did you say Kansas has disappointed you so far this season?
Their defense.
Oh, their defense. Okay. Gotcha. Because I was like, Kansas, like they're 4-2. Like the Cincinnati game was inexcusable for me. I can't believe they lost that game at home. But yes, their defense is a hot mess. It really is, Trev. It really is. I mean, they're only giving up 20 points a game, but that's built on the backs of playing Fresno, Wagner, and a bad West Virginia offense. Give up 42 points to Missouri and 37 to Cincinnati at home. So yeah, I definitely get you on that one. Here's the interesting part of this matchup for me, Trev, is Bama's rush defense against Missouri's rush offense is the matchup to watch. You want to talk about how do you keep Ty Simpson and this receiving core down? Don't let him be on the field. I mean, you look at the Missouri this season, and Alabama's defense. Let me start with Alabama. They held Wisconsin to 92 rushing yards. They held Louisiana Monroe to 92 rushing yards. Neither of which are all that great performances. I mean, like Wisconsin is not a good rushing team. The Maryland and Michigan both held them to 17 yards or more, fewer than what Alabama gave up. Maryland held them to 61 yards on 42 attempts. And then you look at Louisiana Monroe. They're a good rushing team against teams that aren't good. They ran the ball on St. Francis, ran over UTEP, ran over Arkansas State. Bama gave up more rushing yards to them than Northwestern did. Bama gave up more yards per attempt to them than Northwestern did. And then last week, I think, was probably the best rush defense performance they've had, because they gave up 230 rushing yards to Florida State and then 227 to Georgia. The reason that matters is because that's two different types of offenses. Florida State, you can say, well, yeah, Thomas Castellanos was running around on him. That doesn't really reflect how the game went because the running backs were running on him too, but there was a lot of Castellanos. But you could say it's a dual threat quarterback. Well, I mean, that's not why Georgia ran on him. It was Chauncey Bowens and Nate Frazier. Gunnar Stockton had a couple nice runs, but it was more of that traditional type of offense. So they've had 2 games this year where they've given up over 220 yards rushing on defense this season. Gave up 4.7 yards per carry against Florida State, but you allowed 6.9 yards per carry against Georgia. And here's the thing about the Vandy game. The yards were good. They held them 135 yards. Only carried the ball 19 times. They didn't run that much. They went over 7 yards a carry against Alabama, partly because of the lead they had in the second half. So Bama has not been a good rush defense this season. Would you say that's fair statement?
Absolutely.
Trev?
Yeah.
Let's look at Missouri's rushing offense this season. Central Arkansas, 38 for 219. Kansas, 47 for 261. Louisiana for 62 for 427. UMass, 52 for 268. So then you say, okay, none of those teams are really good, like benchmarks. Well, how about against South Carolina, a team that gave up 115 rushing yards to Virginia Tech, 62 to South Carolina State, 146 to Vandy, only 3.95 per carry, and 108 to Kentucky. What did Missouri do against them? 48 carries for 285 yards, 5.9 per carry. They're running on everybody so far. Is that legit or not? Now, here's the one thing about Bama that's a little bit interesting. Their run defense has struggled, but I think this is only the second game where that Tim Keenan's been back kind of full go because he missed the Florida State game. And so I'm very interested to see how that matchup goes. And if Missouri's going to have a shot to win this game, Trev, it's going to be that. It's going to be because their run game was able to control the clock, move the chains, keep Bama off schedule, force Bama to kind of load the box, and then that sets up Bo Perbula to hit a couple shots down the field because they don't throw that great, Trev. I mean, if we're being honest about it, they don't throw that great. Bo Perbula's doing a nice job. He's managing the offense, but since the competition is kind of, ramped up a little bit, not even really ramped up, I guess. I mean, against South Carolina, Louisiana, he averaged 7.9 yards per attempt, threw for 174 yards. UMass, he went for 241, 8.3 per attempt. He only had 171 yards against South Carolina, 6.3 per attempt. But he also rushed for 72 yards in that game. So Bo's been a lot better than I thought he was going to be, but he hasn't been lights out, and this is the game that's really going to tell us how good he is because he's going to have to make some throws. I don't think he's got to throw for a bunch of yards. You don't have to throw for 300 yards to beat Bama. He's going to have to make some throws, though. And can he do that against Alabama's defense, which has been good, but not great this season? But they're getting better, and that's the difference. But when you look at their pass game, Trev, and you look at their receivers, 3 of their top 5 receivers this season are under 10 yards a catch. So, I don't know if that's going to cut it against Alabama. I could be wrong, but I don't know if that's going to cut it. Your leading receiver is Kevin Coleman, who's been everywhere. He was a big-time recruit that signed with him and Travis Hunter, went to the same school. He went to Jackson State. Then he transferred to Louisville. Then he transferred to Mississippi State. Then he transferred to Missouri. So he's going into his 5th season, and he's been around the block a little bit. You know what I mean? He's got 39 catches on the year in 5 games. A lot of catches. He's only averaging 9.9 yards per catch. The number 2 receiver, Marcus Johnson's got 15.3. Their number 3 receiver, Ben Norfleet, the tight ends, 8.7. Their number 4 receiver, Josh Manning, is only at 10.6. Their number 5 receiver, Donovan Olagbode, is at 9.8. So I don't know that you're going to have to hit some shots against Alabama. But how's that matchup going to go? That run game versus run defense matchup is going to be fascinating. And then on the other side of the ball, Trev, Alabama doesn't try to run it, and Missouri doesn't let anybody run on them. That's probably been the more surprising aspect of this team is their rush defense is legit. They gave up 154 yards to Central Arkansas, but only 3.95 yards per carry. They held Kansas to 31 rushing yards. Louisiana went for 117 yards, 5.3 per carry. And that's a team averaging 212 yards rushing this season, by the way. So they run the ball pretty well. And then they held South Carolina to -9 rushing yards. And then last week against UMass, they gave up 19 rushing yards on 16 carries. And so, like, you look at it and say, okay, that rush offense sucks, but I mean, you kind of did to them what Iowa did to them, almost identical numbers. And if your numbers are comparable with Iowa's against an opponent, you've got a pretty good defense. So that's a part of this team from Missouri that's been a little better than I thought it was going to be. Is their defense is better than I thought it was going to be, and they were vulnerable a little bit to Kansas though, and this is going to be a much better passing team than what Kansas was. But can Alabama be balanced? Do they even try to be balanced? That's going to be a very interesting part of this game. So that's how I see this one, Trev.
Yeah, that's actually the side of the ball that I have the most interest in. At some point, if I'm a defensive coordinator preparing for Alabama, I'm daring them to run the football, which sounds crazy to say when we're talking about a program like Alabama. It just doesn't feel right coming off the tongue, but that's exactly where they're at, as odd as it is. And it's not a Kalen DeBoer thing. I mean, at Washington, their running back went crazy the year that they went to the national championship game. So I don't understand the lack of willingness to utilize the run game. Jam Miller had a good game against Vanderbilt, and that's the outlier. They've had one good rushing performance in 5 games. Like, I don't really understand that.
See, the interesting thing, Trevor, is he was a lot like Charlie Weiss at Washington, where his starting running back put up good numbers. You're like, dude, Dylan Johnson ran for almost 1,200 yards. But then you're like, he's the only guy that carried the ball. They only averaged 118 yards rushing a game that year. And now somewhat part of that was they only ran for 102 yards against Texas and 46 against Michigan because Dylan Johnson wasn't healthy. But like, that's kind of the weird part about them is their single back will get 1,000 yards, but then nobody else carries the ball. But you're right. It is weird. Like, they don't even try.
Yeah, I mean,
try to run the ball.
Both Alabama's running backs are on pace to finish the season with like 400 rushing yards. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I have no idea what Missouri is going to try to do on defense. Cause like, yeah, you can stop the run all the live long day, but if they're taking shots down the field, like we know that they will with Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams, who has had a really weird season, by the way, and Isaiah Horton. And it's like, I understand the need, or I guess the desire to not want to run the ball that much, but at some point you're going to come across a game where you're going to have to try to establish some sort of ground game. I don't know if that's against Missouri with their rush defense, but I'm very interested to see what happens with that on Saturday. That's for sure.
So what's at stake for Alabama? Continued supremacy in the SEC. And honestly, Alabama's very much in they're very much in a situation where they can't afford this kind of loss. Not that Missouri's not a good football team, but they've got a better roster. They still have a better roster than Missouri, but they've got Tennessee at home, at South Carolina, home against LSU, home against Oklahoma, at Auburn. They lose this game, that's their second loss of the season. They've got to now win out to get in the SEC title game. And, that maybe they could lose a game and have 3 losses and get like Georgia did last year. But then you're in a situation where if you're in the SEC title game with 3 losses, a 9-3, and you get beat, now all of a sudden it's questionable if you're a playoff team. That's what happens when you lose your opener. Notre Dame found that out. So they're in an interesting situation with what they have coming up on their schedule. They've got to win this game. And that's what's at stake for them and Trev. And for Missouri, it's very simple. Validation. What's at stake for Missouri? Validation. And I'm curious what you think on this, Trev. I think Missouri can get that validation, win or lose. Just depends on how the game gets played. I think if this is a 4-quarter game and Alabama wins it at the very end, I think people are going to look at this Missouri team and say, hey, I think this is a legit football team. Like, yeah, they may have lost that game, but I could see them losing in a hard-fought, Bama kicks a game-winning field goal, and they don't drop in the polls but a spot or 2 maybe. But I think there's validation. But I think that if they're going to be a playoff team at the end of the day, though, Trev, I think they do need a win because they still have to play at Auburn, at Vandy, at Oklahoma, at Arkansas, and then they've got home games against Texas and Mississippi State because part of the problem when your first 6 games are at home means the second half of your season, you're not at home a lot. So I think it gives them validation, but I think it positions them much in a much worse spot to get in the playoff because of what's coming up. What are your thoughts on that, Trev?
Yeah, the how is going to be very important for Missouri. A win obviously takes care of itself. It's tough because I hate looking at games and talking about good losses, but if you play competitive with Alabama, that would open my eyes a little bit to Missouri. Truthfully, I was where you were. I wasn't the biggest believer in Bo Prabula. He proved me wrong against inferior opponents. The win against South Carolina, especially at the time, was impressive. But if they're able to compete against Alabama, that would show me a little something about the Tigers. It would. So I agree with you there.
You ready for some predictions, Trev? What do you say? What do you have in this game?
Yeah, I have Alabama winning this game 34-24.
Okay.
I would make the argument that Missouri hasn't been tested this year. I wouldn't say tested in the slightest because they did play South Carolina, but look, we're talking about a football team that is yet to leave their campus. And it's October. Like that just doesn't. We were given Miami a hard time that they weren't leaving the state of Florida. I mean, Missouri has not left their campus to play a football game yet. And now they have to host Alabama. I think Alabama has more of the horses. Alabama's already played Florida State on the road. They've played Georgia on the road. They've beaten Vanderbilt. Missouri's best win is over 3-2 South Carolina by 9.
And I'd say that's debatable.
Yeah.
I think you could argue that Kansas is their best win.
Sure.
Which neither of those scenarios are all that great because South Carolina hasn't looked like any great shakes this year either.
Yep. And I just think overall that this is just not the best matchup for Missouri. You stop the run really well, and you're going up against a team that doesn't really care to run the football.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, what's your pass defense going to look like? We'll see. You can have a pretty good pass defense, but going up against Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams and Isaiah Horton with Ty Simpson throwing the rock around is a little bit different than facing Jalen Daniels in the Kansas offense. So I'm going with the Crimson Tide in this one by 10. I think this will be a game where I do think it will be a little back and forth. I think Alabama pulls away. I could see it being like
kind of like last week against Vandy.
Yeah, like a 27-21 type of game, and then Alabama and Missouri might kick a field goal or something to, maybe make it, hey, if they can get a stop and prevent Alabama from going down the field and get the ball back and drive down the field, Missouri has a shot to win this. And I think Alabama's going to put the nail in the coffin.
I think the problem for Missouri is I think their lack of balance is going to hurt them in this game. I think they're going to run the ball relatively well early, but I think that Alabama is going to quickly adjust and put all their resources to stopping the run and say, I dare you to beat us throwing the football. I don't know that they can do that. That's the one thing they haven't shown that they can consistently do at all. They've dominated with running the football. And you look at, you talked about, what are their best wins and what are their best matchups and things like that. And the reality is Bo Prabula against South Carolina in a 9-point win went 16 of 27 for 171 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. I don't know that that's going to get it done against Alabama. He's going to have like a Kansas performance where he went 30 of 39 for 334 yards, 3 touchdowns and no picks, and they still ran the ball. I just don't know if you can do that against Alabama. And they got a much better secondary than Kansas does. So if I'm Alabama, I'm saying, hey, I'm going to basically have the same game plan Notre Dame had against Boise State last week. I'm going to make you beat us with Bo Prabula's arm. We're not going to let Ahmed Hardy beat us. We're not going to let the nation's leading rusher run all over us like he has everybody else. You're going to have to beat us with Bo Prabula sitting in the pocket, throwing the football. And if they can implement a game plan like that, then I think that they're going to win. And that's pretty much what I think is going to happen. I just don't think Missouri's got the horses on the back end. Now, here's the key, though. Here's the interesting thing, Trev, is Missouri does have some talent in the front seven from a pass rushing standpoint. The hope that I think they ultimately have is, can they get after Ty Simpson? That's going to be the big question for me. Damon Wilson, the Ohio State transfer, has 22 pressures in 5 games, 6 hits plus sacks in the quarterback. Zion Young, the other end, has 21 pressures on the season, 8 hits plus sacks in the quarterback. And then Darren Smith, who's part of their edge rotation, also has 14 pressures. If I'm wrong on this game, it's because of 2 things. 1, Missouri was able to run the ball on Bama, and Bo hits a few play action shots, and B, the edge rushers from Missouri wreak havoc on Alabama's big, slow-footed offensive tackles. That's the hope for Missouri. I have Bama winning, though, 30-17. Missouri's got to show me they can win a game like this first, because they've had better teams than this lose games like this, like the game that they lost to LSU a couple years ago when they had that really good receiving core, Luther Bradley, but that's Notre Dame guy, Luther Burden, Theo Weiss, Brady Cook, like that really good receiving core they had a couple years ago. And they had that running back, Cody Schrader, the team that beat Ohio State, and then they couldn't beat LSU at home. Like, because they couldn't stop Jaden Daniels in that receiving core. I think that happens here. I have Alabama win 30-17.
Let's get to game number 3, Brian. This is another top 10 battle. We're switching back to the Big Ten. The number 7 Indiana Hoosiers are on the road playing in Autzen Stadium against the number 3 Oregon Ducks. Kickoff is at 3:30 p.m. on CBS. Right now on FanDuel, Oregon is favored by 7.5 points. Over under is set at 55.5. Top 10 matchup in the Big Ten, Brian. Talk to us about it. This is going to be a good one.
Man, I am so looking forward to this game. This is not a matchup we've seen a whole lot, Trev. This is just the 4th time these two teams have met. First time since Oregon joined the Big Ten, which wasn't that long ago. It was this last year. And Indiana has the most recent victory, Trev. Oregon leads the matchup 2-1, the series 2-1, but Indiana won the last meeting, which was all the way back in 2004. Things have changed quite a bit for these two programs. Other than that, there's not a lot of history here. You know, and so, but it's kind of that game where when we look at this, Trevor, is how good are these two teams? Is this going to be a game where, like, I think Oregon has kind of proved themselves as like, hey, we're really good. Right now, Indiana's still kind of living off of, hey, we beat Illinois and Iowa. And so I don't know that there's like, I think people recognize that Indiana's good. I don't know that a lot of people, including some people on this channel, that necessarily think Indiana is a legitimate Big Ten contender. And I think this game is going to be the game that shows that they are or are not. Even with the loss, they're still in it. If it's one of those games, Trev, where it's like a 4-quarter back and forth, whoever has the ball last wins. If they get beat handily, then it's kind of like, okay, they're good, but they're not on that Ohio State, Oregon level yet. And for Oregon, it's like, yeah, that win over Penn State was a great win, but it's kind of like LSU's win over Clemson. That game doesn't look all that impressive now. Like UCLA's offense looked better against Penn State than your offense did, you know, so it's not the same, you know, it's a different situation and all that. But I think we feel like we know more about Oregon. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I feel like people think that they definitely know what Indiana is right now. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think Indiana's legit. And I think they're going to give Oregon a game. Can they beat Oregon at Oregon? That's a different question. But the thing that doesn't get talked about enough that's going to really determine this game, Trevor, is I think this Indiana defense is legit. And they've even had D'Angelo Ponce healthy for the last few games. He's back and healthy, I think, for this game. So I think that's the thing that to me makes Indiana a legitimate contender to win this game is their defense. But if their defense can't get rolling, I don't know that they can win this game on the road in a shootout. That's going to be the battle. But Oregon gets a chance to make a statement. They got leaped by Miami last week in one of the polls. This is their chance to say, you shouldn't have done that. Like, they beat a borderline top 25 team by 6 at home. Wasn't that close. Look what we did to Indiana. So that's kind of how I see that's what I think is kind of on the line for this game, Trev, is it's for Oregon. It's kind of like what we talked about in the last game. For Oregon, it's okay. You know, like, we think you're legit. We think you're a title contender. You get a chance to prove that. For Indiana, I don't think people are believers yet. 7.5. What'd you say the spread was for this game?
7.5.
7.5 from FanDuel. I don't know that people think Indiana's a believer. They're believers that they're legitimately on the same level as Ohio State and Indiana right now, or Oregon right now. Well, this is your chance to show it. Because here's why. The last 2 times they've played teams like this, they got whooped. They got whooped by Ohio State. They got whooped by Notre Dame. So this is their chance to say, hey, look, we're legitimate. We're big time. I think for Indiana, they're like Missouri. They don't have to win to make a statement. Oregon does. I think Oregon does it because I think the Penn State win isn't going to look as good by the end of the year. There's something going on with that Penn State team, Trev. We've been talking about it for a month. They're going to lose at least one more game, if not two, the rest of the way. You're going to look back and be like, yeah, that win's not what people think it was. This is the win that's going to be the resume builder for Oregon. Or when you look at the rest of their schedule, Trev, you better not lose another game because people are going to look back at your schedule and be like, yeah, you're probably still a playoff team, but you're not going to host at 10-2 when your best win is over an 8-4 Penn State team or an 8-4 Iowa team or an 8-4 Washington team. And then they still have to host USC. So they start getting in some little tricky territory with some of those games coming up if they lose this football game. So it's going to be fascinating. Whereas Indiana in this matchup, Trev, if they lose this game, they've got that matchup at Penn State. The rest of their games are games they should absolutely win. So I think their road is a little bit smoother, I think, than what Oregon's is, because neither of these teams have great second half of the season schedules. So I'm fascinated by this matchup. And look, is Indiana legit? That's the question, right? Is Indiana not? And by legit, I mean, are they like a legitimate? You might be the best team in the Big Ten. That's the legitimate. I think people realize Indiana's good, just not Ohio State, Oregon good. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Are they solidly in tier 1? That's what's at stake for Indiana in this game. You have a head coach that's been, since he got to Bloomington, rightfully so. Google me, I beat the you-know-what out of ranked teams, and I do this and that. And it's like, okay, this is now Indiana's chance to go and prove that, hey, we are solidly in the tier 1 of the Big Ten. Because right now, I would make the argument that they're teetering in between 1 and 2. If somebody wants to pound their fists on the table, say they're tier 1, I don't have a whole lot of pushback. Somebody's adamant that they're tier 2, top of tier 2, you're not going to get a whole lot of pushback from me. But this is the game that starts to separate that line and will definitively tell, at least for me, what side they're on, win or lose, which is going to play into my prediction. But the storylines from this game are insane. I mean, you have Oregon's offense who has scored at least 30 points in every single game versus Indiana's defense that hasn't allowed a team to reach 20 points. Okay, so what goes into that? Well, Oregon hasn't really played a defense with a pulse like Indiana's.
Nobody's got past 15 against Indiana.
No. But then you look at Indiana's schedule. It's like, okay, have you really played an offense that's comparable to Oregon's? I would make the argument that you haven't. So which one takes the day? Is it Indiana's stout defense? Is it Oregon's high-powered offense? I love those type of matchups.
Yes.
I do.
Yes.
Almost as much as I love like two offenses going at it. But then you start getting into like when you get into X's and O's with two high-powered offenses, sometimes those games come down to who just gets the ball last.
Mm-hmm.
This is a game where, okay, who makes the stop?
Yeah.
Is it Indiana's defense that makes the stop, or is it Oregon's offense that puts the drive together? I love those storylines. And these games are so much fun to talk about. It's on the road, which adds a little bit to it. Can Indiana kind of nix the, okay, Big Ten teams struggle going out west and, teams from the Pac-12 struggle going out east? Which one kind of takes the day there as well? That's another storyline from this one. And then you have two head coaches going at it that are also looking for their big win.
Right. Yeah, we thought Lanning got his, but then that kind of got diminished a little bit by nobody's talking about Oregon beating Penn State anymore.
Nope.
Because now the storyline is, did you see what UCLA did to them?
Mm-hmm.
A team that both of these teams would beat by 50 at least.
Yeah. So this one's going to be a lot of fun. A lot of fun, Brian. Yeah. I'm excited. It stinks that their kickoff is at the same time as Notre Dame's too. I was hoping this was going to be the NBC night.
That's why I'm hoping Notre Dame just is rolling at halftime, because then I can kind of be like doing this the whole second. The other interesting storyline is these are two of the biggest. I'm trying to think of the right word to say. Just, I can't think of a nice word with young people listening. I'll just say it's two of my least favorite personalities at head coach in college football. Like Dan Lanning just really rubs me the wrong way, and Curt Cignetti really rubs me the wrong way. But they're also both really good football coaches, and they're also both they're so similar, except for their age. They're both similar. lot of swagger, talk a lot of trash, run the score up on teams all the time, can't win the big games. And you say Oregon got their big win last year against Ohio State, and then they got a rematch and they got absolutely hammered. So you're like, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. But somebody's going to have to get their big win, Trev. Who do you think it's going to be?
I have the Oregon Ducks in this one, 31-28. That's why I said Indiana can make a statement in this game, win or lose. This is a good Indiana football team, one that I had ranked in my preseason top 10. And I had them ranked in the top 10 for a reason. With that being said, I'm not as sold on them as others. I'm not as far on the end of the spectrum to say that they're fraudulent, because I also don't think that they're fraudulent. If you watch football and you pay attention, you understand the flow of games. What Indiana has done this season has been impressive. It also does kind of remind me of last year a little bit. And people are like, oh, you don't think Indiana's legit? Look what they just did to Nebraska, who was 4-1. Fair. Sure. You don't think they're legit? They just beat Michigan 20-15, and that's Michigan, okay? This year, hey, they just beat Illinois, 63-10. They sure did. Then they just beat Iowa 20-15. They sure did. And then they got to Ohio State.
Yep.
And then they got to Notre Dame. Okay, well, now you're going up against an Oregon team that's the defending Big 12 or Big 10 champs. And you get them in their stadium. IU has an awesome opportunity in front of them to say, hey, we are in the tier 1. We might not win, and this is how I see this game going down. We might not win, but we're past the oh, they're Indiana. They'll beat the teams they're supposed to beat and then lose to the big time opponents in a big way. Because, we heard it going into Ohio State, this Indiana team is legit. They're legit. What I just want is for Indiana fans specifically to pick a side. Like you either think that you're an elite team or you keep playing oh gosh, we're Indiana. We're not even supposed to be here. It's impressive what we're doing.
That's a great point.
Pick one.
A great point. Pick a lane, bro.
Yeah, you're either an elite team or you're the, oh shucks, Who would have thought us old Hoosiers?
We're just happy to be here.
Yeah.
We get moral victories from close losses.
Yeah, because with the personality of your head coach, you can't be like that.
Yeah.
Oregon didn't have that mentality their first year in the Big Ten, and they won the conference. Didn't do much in the postseason, but they came in and won the conference in their first year in it. So Indiana has a lot at stake for this game. I do think Oregon wins, and I think home field advantage is going to play a little bit into this. Because unfortunately for Indiana, their last really big top-ranked matchups have all been on the road. They were in Columbus, they were in South Bend, and now they're in Eugene. And that's tough. But I have Oregon pulling this one out. I don't have it as like high. 31-28 Oregon. Yep.
We have the same margin.
Yep. And IU is going to give them a game. For the non-believers who think that Oregon is just going to run it up and win by 2 scores, Indiana is a good football team. And one that I would be nervous if Notre Dame was playing. That's how highly I think of Indiana.
Defense is playing right now. Darn right.
And believe me, if Notre Dame was playing IU, my final score prediction is not 31-28. Take the over in that hypothetical matchup. But I do have Oregon winning 31-28, Brian.
I got 34-31. Indiana.
Ooh.
I'm calling for the upset, baby. Dude, I like this football team. I do. I've been more impressed with Indiana watching the film than I have Oregon. And here's another stat for you, Trevor. In the last 2 years, because everybody talks about Curt Cignetti, and rightfully so. The job he has done is phenomenal. And what I'm about to say is evidence of him being a good football coach, because this isn't like, I'm not one of those people that, like, when a coordinator does really well, you try to take some shine off the head coach by pointing to the coordinator. Like, well, who hired the guy? Who was beating down the door to try to get Bryant Haynes as their defensive coordinator? He brought him in he saw him as a position coach at Elon and UC Davis, brought him in to be the co-D coordinator at JMU for 3 years, then promotes him to D coordinator at JMU, and then brings him with him to Indiana. And their defense has been legit the last 2 seasons. Because people forget, Indiana held both Ohio State, their defense held both Ohio State and Notre Dame to under 30 points last year, basically. Because Ohio State had 38, but they had a pick six, a punt return for a touchdown, and then also had a post where they took over inside the 5-yard line, I think, on a turnover. Like, their defense played well that game. Their offense didn't. That's the difference. And, I look at this, Trev, and I start saying, like, I am more impressed with what I've seen from Indiana. Here's the stat I was going to bring up before I sidetracked myself. The last 2 years since Bryant Haynes has taken over as the defensive coordinator, Indiana has given up 12 touchdown passes in would be 18 games. They've given up 12 touchdown passes. They've picked off 22. This year, they've allowed 1 touchdown pass, and it was in a game that they won by 50. And they've picked off 7 passes. Now, they have not faced a quarterback nearly as good throwing the football as Dante Moore. But they don't have the same weapons at receiver they did last year. And yes, they've scored 30 in every game, but they needed overtime to get to 30 against Penn State. And I think this defense is better than the Penn State defense. The only thing that gives me pause is that it's at Oregon, and we have seen Big Ten teams, Trev, struggle to go out there. And I know you're going to talk about, I think you said you're going to talk something about that tonight in some of the different matchups. So I won't talk too much about that now. It's a program defining opportunity for Indiana. And I just like this team better. I like them in the trenches better. I think their quarterback, the difference between this year's team and last year's team in a lot of ways, Trev, it's Fernando Mendoza. He's a much more dynamic quarterback than what Curtis O'Rourke was. And their receiving core is legit. Their running backs are legit. Their O-line, Patty Coogan and that O-line are playing their butts off. I think they've rushed for over 300 yards in 4 of their 5 games. The only team to keep them under 300 yards is Iowa. And I just like this Indiana team. I don't like their coach a whole lot as far as his personality. Heck of a coach, though. Absolutely heck of a coach. Like, you can dislike a guy personally and still be like, yeah, I didn't like Magic Johnson growing up because I was a Celtics fan. But you know what I did every Sunday when the Lakers are on? I tuned in. I was watching. You know what I mean? Because I loved watching Magic play. I just didn't like Magic because I couldn't like the Lakers. You know what I mean? Like, I'm a Celtics fan in the 80s. I can't like the Lakers. But I loved watching them play. Don't tell nobody, Trev. Shh. Loved watching them play. And that's how I'm about Curt Cignetti. I can't stand the guy's personality. But I love watching his teams play. If you like good, well-coached football teams, you got to like their team. Yeah. I just think this team is legit. And I think this game's going to be a little bit higher scoring. But I think this Indiana team's more physical. I think they're better coached. And they can match it Oregon for athletes, in my opinion. So I'm going with the Hoosiers for the upset, 34-31.
This will be the game, and this is me saying it, having predicted them to lose. This will be the game that Indiana will have the argument to surpass what Penn State has done in the Big Ten the last decade, in my opinion. I think they are going to really give Oregon a game. The one thing that I think that is going to be very, very interesting is how Cignetti coaches this in a close matchup, because you and I both think that this is going to be a field goal game. And I watched Dan Lanning coach in Happy Valley at night in a whiteout in a game that went to overtime. And I also watched him coach in a close game in the regular season last year at home against Ohio State. I don't know if I've seen Curt Cignetti do that. Not saying that he can't.
They haven't had any close games.
But exactly.
Iowa's the closest thing they had to a close game.
Yep. So you're
going to defend them differently late than you're going to defend Oregon.
Yeah. So I will be very interested to see how that happens. Like I said, not that I don't think that he can. That's just another one of those interesting coaching storylines that feed into how exciting of a game I think this is. And I'll say this. Because Brian, above else, you and I just love watching good football and seeing good football.
Mm-hmm.
I just hope that this is a good game.
Yes.
You know,
true for all three.
Yes.
The Illinois-Ohio State game, I don't really care as much about being a good game because I just don't think Illinois is on the same level. I hope the Bama, Missouri, and Oregon IU games are good games.
Yes.
Especially this one. But and if it's not going to be a close game, I'm going to be honest with you. I hope Indiana smacks them. I hope it's not the other way around. That's kind of what I'm hoping because I dislike Curt Cignetti's personality. I think he's a heck of a coach. I'm not sold on Dan Lanning as a football coach. We've talked about this. He walked into a pretty good situation. And he is a guy who I think success is driven more by who is his coordinator than it is him. I think if Will Stein leaves after this year, I'm very curious to see what happens with the Oregon's football team. Very curious. So that's where I'm at. So I'm going with the upset, Trev. This is the first time we've split so far in these 3 games. I'm going with the Hoosiers with the upset.
Well, let's get to this next game then here, Brian. Game number 4 that we're talking about, it's in the SEC, and it's the Red River Shootout. And it's between the number 6 Oklahoma Sooners against the unranked 3-2 Texas Longhorns. Kickoff is at 3:30 p.m. It's going to be on ABC. When I looked last night, I'm going to have to go and refresh this because I have FanDuel pulled up here. Right now, it's a pick'em game, but they still have Texas favored on FanDuel -1.5. So it is very much a pick'em game, but I did think it was interesting to see Texas favored considering how they've started the season. But Brian, this is going to be a very, very interesting matchup because I have no idea how this one's going to go down. A lot of different talking points in this one, man. Lots of different ones.
Red River Shootout, man. I can't wait for this one. This is a fascinating one. Texas leads the all-time series 64-51-5, which is interesting because a lot of people think Texas and Oklahoma have always been in the same conference together. They didn't actually join the same conference until the 90s when the Southwest Conference went away because Oklahoma was in the Big 8 and Texas was in the Southwest Conference, but they still played each other every year. So this is going to be an interesting one. Texas has won 2 of the last 3. Oklahoma had the upset 2 years ago. Oklahoma won 6 of the previous 7. So this has had a tendency to be streaky. If you remember at the beginning of the Mac Brown era, he just could not beat Oklahoma. And then Vince Young and Colt McCoy show up, and all of a sudden he knows how to beat Oklahoma. You know, just imagine amazing how that happens. But, I look at it, Trev. I think this is a fascinating matchup because now everybody's down on Texas. And, they're not that team. Arch stinks. This stinks. That stinks. Texas is in trouble. And Oklahoma's this great team, top 10, and everybody's loving Oklahoma right now. And if I'm Brent Venables, I'm like, oh, crap. Like, this is not what I wanted. I did not want this football team coming in with something to prove. I just don't. Now, and then the other part of it is we still don't know if John Mateer is going to play because he's listed as questionable. They're kind of hemming and hawing. I kind of think he's going to play. At least they're going to try to play him. But if he doesn't play, this takes on a whole new spectrum. If you're Texas, you hope he plays if you're going to win this game because if you beat Michael Hawkins, they're going to dismiss the win. But just they need something good to happen to them to get back on track. For Oklahoma, I still think they're still searching for sort of that win that tells everyone you're legit. And I don't know that the Michigan win gives them that. It was a bit of an ugly win. I don't know that there's a lot of – I know the voters have Michigan in the top 15. I don't know that the College Football Playoff Committee members would probably look at Michigan the same way the AP voters do. You know what I'm saying? And so I think this is the kind of game that says, yep, Oklahoma's legit, or it's the kind of matchup that says – Oklahoma may be good, but we wrote the eulogy for the Longhorns a little bit too soon. And I don't know we don't know which way it's going to go. I have some opinions on that, but that's what makes this game interesting. And the thing is, too, these two teams are very different than what they've been in the past. In the past, they were high-scoring teams and all that. But this year, Trev, I think the best part of both teams is their defense. And that's true for Oklahoma. I think the thing that people are completely overlooking about Oklahoma, they've played 2 Power 4 teams this year, and in both games, they only scored 24 points. But their defense held Michigan to 13 and Auburn to 17. Their defense has given up less than 10 points a game. And then we know the struggles that Texas have been having on offense. But, these are 2 teams who are fueled by their defense. And whoever's defense can play the best, or you could say whoever's offense can make the most plays against 2 really good defenses is going to determine this game. But that's what I think a lot of people are missing about this game, Trev, is these are 2 teams that perennially big-time offenses that if they're going to be playoff teams this year, it's going to be because of their defenses. This is a huge game for both teams, Trev. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I love it because both teams have something to prove, but it's a little bit different. Can Oklahoma prove that, hey, Brett Venables is the guy to be their head coach, and Oklahoma is working its way back to being in the limelight of college football once again? Because really, since Lincoln Riley left, it's kind of been, Oklahoma's been like around it, but it's Brett Venables has been disappointing. And then with Texas, more immediately, it's you went from being the number one team in the country to unranked before we reach, the midway point through the season. That's a tough look. You're 0-2 against Power 4 opponents. One of them is now the number one ranked team in the country in Ohio State, and the other one's Florida. So who is Texas? You can beat up on Sam Houston, UTEP, and San Jose State all you want to, but now you're starting to get into the meat and potatoes of your schedule, and Texas has a lot to prove, a lot. And with a loss, if Texas loses, I would say Texas has a little bit more on the line in this game than Oklahoma.
Oh, yes.
Because if Texas loses, they're out of the playoff conversation. I don't think that there's a way that they climb. They go from the middle of October being unranked to one of the 12 best teams in college football. I just don't see that. But a win over a top 10 team against Oklahoma, that kind of gets people talking about you again.
Oh, yeah.
Oklahoma can survive a loss to Texas.
Well, and partly, Trev, because they have a lot of games, they have a lot to prove. Oklahoma's final 6 games are South Carolina on the road and then a bunch of top 15 teams. Number 4, Ole Miss, at 12, Tennessee, at 8, Alabama, home against 14, Missouri, number 14, Missouri, home against number 11, LSU. If Oklahoma's 10-2 at the end of the year against that schedule, plus Texas and Michigan, they're a playoff team and should be a playoff team and should probably host a playoff game if they're 10-2 against that schedule. Would you agree that with that? I mean, they're good. The concern, the counter argument is, yeah, but that's why you need this win because you've got that slate coming up. So Oklahoma, in theory, is fine with a loss here. Their destiny is still much like Ohio State. We talked about if Ohio State loses to Illinois, they still 100% control their own destiny. Because if they win out the rest of the way, they're in the Big Ten title game and they're a lock for the playoff. Same thing with Oklahoma. If they lose to Texas and then go 5-1 the rest of the year and finish the season 11-1, I don't care what happens in the SEC title game that they would then be in. They're in the playoffs and they're hosting. But it's going to be a lot harder to be 10-2. I think Oklahoma is one of 3 or 4 teams that has a shot to get in at 9-3. That's the only saving grace that they have. Depending on who they lose to and how some of these teams finish, they could get in at 9-3, especially if Michigan ends up being as good as some people think that they are, and they're 9-3 and ranked in the top 20 kind of thing. But like if Missouri falls off and this team falls off, and then they're 2-3 against ranked teams, it might be a little bit tougher. But I think Oklahoma has the brand power that against that, because like there's no Ole Miss. There's no Kentucky like loss like Ole Miss had. There's no Vandy loss left on their schedule. There's no the Oklahoma loss that Bama had last year. Like I don't know if any of the teams are going to beat outside of South Carolina are going to be 6-6, 7-5 teams. I think there'll be a lot of 8-4, 9-3, 10-2 type of teams. So their schedule is going to look good. Texas, on the other hand, Trev, to your point, they don't like they're 10-2. If they lose this game and they're 3-3, they're done. Like they're done. I don't know that they can get in at 9-3. I mean, the loss to Ohio State, loss to Oklahoma, they'd have to beat Kentucky, Mississippi State, and Georgia on the road, and then they'd have to beat Vandy, Arkansas, and Texas A&M home. I just don't know if they can do that. I do think Texas could have a shot to get in at 9-3 if they run the table down the stretch, beat Georgia on the road, beat Texas A&M in the last game of the year. They'd have a shot to get in at 9-3. But what are the odds that if this team loses to Oklahoma on a neutral field that they're going to go into Athens and beat Georgia? Like they struggle up in the trenches against Georgia last year. And I know that Georgia's not as good in the trenches this year as they were last year, but Texas is way worse, especially on offense. So this is a do or die moment for Texas. It absolutely is a do or die moment for Texas. Now, what's at stake for Oklahoma? Legitimacy. You win this game, then people are finally believers in, okay, Oklahoma's legit. You also give yourself a grace period because now you have to really collapse down the stretch to not get in. Because like I said, I think at 9-3, Oklahoma's got a shot to still get in. But 10-2, you're hosting. That's the difference, right? And being 10-2 becomes much harder if you lose this game, as we mentioned. For Texas, I think a win over Oklahoma, a top 10 Oklahoma, puts them back in the conversation of, okay, Texas is going to be fine. They may not be fine, but that's what the storylines are going to be coming out of this game if they're able to win. And they have a shot to get right, Trev. If they win this game to get to 4-2, I think that jumps them back into the top 25. Then they're at Kentucky next week. Then they're at Mississippi State the week after that. Now, both of those teams, especially Mississippi State, could upset Texas. And then they got Vandy at home. So they've got a shot, if they can win this game, to quickly climb way back up in the rankings because there's going to be so much chaos in the SEC. And Texas is still very much in the SEC title game conversation if they win this game because remember, of their 2 losses, only one of them is an league loss so far. Their first loss was obviously non-conference. So I think Texas, if they win this game, they're going to be like, y'all wrote us off way too quick. And now Sark's got that disrespect card he can play all year. You know, like, oh, they disrespected us. They knocked us out, blah, 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 blah. Well, you should have got knocked out in top 25. You hadn't beaten anybody. You hadn't proved you were a top 25 team. But you win this game, you jump back into like 21, and then you beat Kentucky, you beat Mississippi State, you beat Vandy, and all of a sudden you're 13th, 14th because of all the chaos that you and I are expecting to happen the next month. And now Texas is right back in it, but a lot of the pressure's off of them now because now they're playing the disrespect card. Nobody respects us. Nobody thought we could do this. They all wrote us off when we went to play Oklahoma. And I don't know that I want to give Texas that kind of ammunition going in because they're going to get better at some point in time. They are. If you're Oklahoma, you hope this isn't the week they figured out.
One of the things that benefits both teams is that this is the Red River shootout. It's a rivalry game. And these are the kind of games where people put aside resumes, previous resumes, overall records, because some people will – what?
You mean you think it's possible for a team that's good enough to go play in the college football playoffs to get beat by their rival who's like 6-6 in this matchup? Like, when does that happen, Trev? Like, I don't remember. Oh, that's right. Like 2 years ago when Oklahoma beat Texas coming off of a 6-7 year and Texas went on to play in the semifinals. I was being sarcastic with that, obviously. But to your point, remember the year Charlie Strong's bad Texas team beat a really good Oklahoma team in this matchup?
Sure do.
To your point, Trev, I wanted to cut you off because there's no rivalry in which this is more true because it's never played at somebody else's stadium. It's always a home game. I mean, it's always a neutral site game, which to me even more so means, because you can say whatever you want, but if throw out the records when Auburn's going to Tuscaloosa. Okay, maybe. But this is a neutral crowd, 50-50 crowd. It's a closer game for Texas. It's not that far for Oklahoma. You got to throw all that stuff out the window. And I don't think there's a rivalry outside of maybe Ohio State and Michigan. But even then, I don't believe that to be true because of what happened the 15 years before the most recent thing, where Ohio State just dominated it. Mm-hmm. But because it's one of 2 rivalries that aren't played at home that I can think of the big rivalries, the other being Georgia, Florida. But those are the number 2 rivalry games for those 2 teams. This is the number 1.
Yep.
To say whatever you want about Bedlam, it's still the OU's number 2 rivalry. With all due respect. It may be number 1 for Okie State, but it's not number 1 for Oklahoma.
Yeah.
So I think, Trev, your point is phenomenal, and I'll let you keep making it. But I just had to interrupt you because I think the neutral field aspect of this makes this so much more unique to all those other rivalries.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's going to be people that walk away if Oklahoma wins. There's going to be people that walk away saying, what did they prove? They beat a now 3-3 football team. It's like, but in games like this, the records get set aside because of the implications of what this means for Oklahoma. Yeah, and so that's one of the things that I wanted to highlight because I saw some of it kind of happening around like Twitter. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, Oklahoma could win, but Texas isn't good this year. It's like, but these are the games where it's like you kind of throw out previous records. Yep. You throw out, who's beaten who up to this point. Because the only thing that matters for both Texas and Oklahoma this week is Texas and Oklahoma. And I think that's going to be really, really fun to watch. Really fun.
Here's the interesting part, Trev. This is the matchup that will determine this game. Oklahoma's front against Texas's offensive line. Texas' offensive line just has to hold their water in this game. Like, you can't get dominated, because I think the other side of the ball, I think Texas's D-line can get after Oklahoma's offensive line. I don't think Oklahoma's offensive line is very good. You look at some of the numbers that they've put up this year, Trev, and it's like, yeah, that still looks a lot like last year's offensive line. If we're being honest about this thing, yeah, you ran for 228 yards against Temple and 185 against Kent State, but they ran for 103 yards against Illinois State. They ran for 138 yards against Michigan on 40 attempts, 3.45 per carry. They ran for 32 yards on 26 attempts against Auburn. And they only averaged 4.5 yards per attempt against Kent State. They've only been above, so they went for 5.43 against Temple, which is not great. Their next best performance is 4.51 yards per carry. That was against Kent State. Their offensive line still isn't good. And that's going to come down. That's going to have a lot to say. So if Texas's O-line can just hold their water in this game, I think that's going to give Texas a shot. If they don't, then I think your D-line could hold Oklahoma in check and you still lose this football game. That's going to be the fascinating. So, we talked about kind of what's at stake for both teams, Trev. I want to hear your prediction. I'm very fascinated to see where you go with this one, because I'm curious if we're going to have two disagreements in a row.
I'm Boomer Sooner this Saturday. I have Oklahoma winning this one 24-21. I think it's going to be a lower scoring game. I do. Neither offense is really taken off, to your point. But I have Oklahoma winning because their defensive front, I think, is going to give Texas's offensive line a lot of problems. And it is going another factor is Arch Manning is still a young quarterback. I'm not getting into discussion of, bench him. He sucks. Like he's young.
We told you all this offseason. We both warned you guys this offseason. You're going to have to be patient with Arch. He's not what people think he is.
No.
And he's going to need time, especially playing behind a terrible offensive line.
Yes, and they're going up against a defensive line that a couple weeks ago had 10 sacks against Auburn.
Yeah.
They have 105 pressures on the season, 33 combined hits plus sacks on the quarterback through 5 games. They're number 2, tied second in the country in sacks this year, and they're second in the country in tackles for a loss on the season with 50. Oklahoma doesn't have to put on an offensive performance in this one to win. Their offense just has to do enough to win. Now, I say that like it's going to be an easy task because Texas's defense has been kind of the highlight of their team so far this year as well. But Florida was able to find some holes in them later in the game. DJ Lagway, I thought, played pretty decent. So I just think that overall Oklahoma's defensive line is going to give them too many problems, and Arch is going to get overwhelmed. Not because he sucks, but it's because he's young. And so far this year in big stages, he hasn't performed that well. He didn't perform that well against Ohio State in week 1 in Columbus. He didn't perform that well in the swamp against Florida. And now he's going and having to perform and has to perform well in the Red River shootout. Yeah. I mean, it's a tough slate for a young quarterback. So I have the Sooners in this one.
I actually think Arch played better against Florida than he's given credit for. I do. I think, he hit 5 balls over 20 yards. He went, let me count it up here real quick. He went 9 of 17 on deep shots against Florida. The problem is the stat of the game, and this. I think you nailed the matchup to watch, Trev. Texas allowed 36 pressures and 14 sacks plus hits on the quarterback. That's a result of 2 things. 1, your O-line stinks. And 2, Arch holds on to the ball too long. He does. He holds on to the ball too long. That's the part of being a young quarterback. And that's the thing that if I'm talking about Texas, that's the thing that concerns me about this matchup. You've got to just give them some time. You've just got to give them some time. And the other part too that I think is you're hoping plays in Texas's favor. Arch is taking his hits and he's made his mistakes, but the last 2 games that he's played in, Trev, he's completed 34 of 50 passes, and he's thrown for 572 yards, and he's completing about 12 yards per attempt his last 2 games. Against Sam Houston State, obviously, but he averaged 9.1 yards per attempt against Florida. He just has to avoid the bad turnovers, because when Arch gets picked, it's usually like, what was that? Like, who was even throwing to? He's got to avoid those plays. But I think Texas is going to keep getting better all year. Their O-line is going to not be as bad. It's never going to be good, but it's not going to be as bad as it has been. But I just think they're going to get better. I think the young receivers are going to get better. I just don't think they're going to be this bad all season. And then also, last week we finally got a chance to see a little bit of Emmett Mosley last week. He played 2 catches for 40 yards. He's healthy again this week. I think he changes their receiving core a little bit. I think the more he's in it, the better. So I think you kind of get a sense where I'm going with this one, Trevor. I'm taking kind of what you said. Throw all that other stuff out the window. Throw out matchups and all this kind of stuff. I have been wrong on this game so many times in the past because I went with the better team, and I'm constantly wrong. I'm actually going Texas. I think the worst thing to happen to Oklahoma was Texas getting beat last week. Because I think this team is going to kind of rally together and say, hey, we're not going to take it anymore. I also think John Mateer's injury is problematic because he is their offense. They are a very different team when he doesn't play, and I don't think he's going to play. But even if he does, I think Oklahoma's offensive line is going to have their own issues with Texas's D line, and the fact that they just can't run a football. I don't know that you're going to throw the ball all over Florida or over Texas again. And so I think that's where I like it. I do think Oklahoma has solid receivers, but I think their O-line is an issue. I'm going with Texas to pull the upset in this game. I'm going 27-21.
Well, Texas is favored.
Yeah. I wonder how much of that has to do with Mateer not playing.
Yeah.
Or questioning.
Yeah.
So I'm going Texas 27-21. I'm kind of there where I just am not a believer in Oklahoma yet. I just haven't been impressed with Oklahoma this season. Like that first drive against Michigan, I'm like, dude, they're about to run Michigan off the field. Like Michigan had no answers for them. And then after that, you never saw that again. When they went off the script, it was like, and didn't look good against Auburn. I mean, they're another team that's beat up on a lot of bad teams, but whenever they play somebody good, their offense looks very mediocre. Scored 35 points against Illinois State, 42 against Temple, 44 against Kent State. Scored 24 against Michigan, 24 against Auburn. I've just been impressed by him. So I like the Longhorns in this one, Trev.
Last game that we are taking a deep dive preview into. We're going back to the Big Ten. Number 15, the Michigan Wolverines are on the road playing out in the Coliseum against the USC Trojans. Showdown out west. Kicks off at 7:30 p.m. on NBC, I'm assuming following the Notre Dame game. Currently on FanDuel, if you look, USC is favored by 2.5 points. The over-under is set at 57.5. A very interesting game to talk about, Brian. I'm excited to see this one go down.
You know what's some little stats about this series history, Trev? USC leads the series 6-5. 8 of the 11 games have been in the Rose Bowl. They have never played in any other bowl game except the Rose Bowl. Here's another little fascinating statistic. The Trojans lead the all-time series 6-5. Michigan has a 3-0 lead in regular season games. They beat USC twice back in the 50s, I believe, and then they beat them last year. And it was a pretty good game. A game where USC won Michigan won the game throwing for like 30-something yards. That won't happen this year. This is going to be a very fascinating game. It was an epic game last year. I mean, between two not very good teams, but it was still a fun game to watch. Michigan goes down. I think they converted 2 4th downs on the game-winning drive, including the go-ahead touchdown with like 30 seconds left. A 4th and goal from the 1. Michigan runs it in. This is going to be a very different type of matchup. Very intriguing game. Michigan's looking to show people that they're for real. USC's looking to show people that they're for real. Michigan's getting a lot more benefit of the doubt than USC is simply because people thought Michigan was going to be better preseason. I don't know that I did, but this is 2. I think they're both 4-1, I believe, Trev. I believe they're both 4-1 at this point in time of the season. Obviously, both of them had competitive losses. USC's was a lot more competitive than Michigan's, but USC also played a team that's not as good as the team that beat Michigan. So this is of all the matchups, this is the one that I think I'm least certain of how it's going to go. because I don't know enough about either of these teams because they haven't really played anybody. They both lost to the only good team they played, in my opinion. So I think these two teams are probably, I don't know what your thoughts are, Trev. I think these two teams have the most to prove compared to all the other matchups that we have talked about so far, especially USC.
Yeah, I mean, who's going to move up in Big Ten conversations? That's what this game speaks to me. You talk about the top of the Big Ten. You have Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana. You have Illinois trying to fight for some sort of ranking in between the tiers. Mm-hmm. Then after that, I think you get into the USC-Michigan discussion. Is USC finally going to start making a name for themselves in the Big Ten? Or are they going to continue with it's a conference and the travel and we got this kickoff time and this kickoff time? You know,
can't use that excuse this week. You're at home.
Exactly. So I think it'll be interesting to see who comes away with this one. For Michigan, it's about, hey, okay, your run game is what we thought it would be with Justice Haynes, who's been electric this season and not talked about enough. Sidebar, but I don't think Justice Haynes is talked about enough in college football. We talked in the preseason about how Michigan's passing game is going to be better by default. Numbers-wise, it is. Effectiveness in big games, So what starts to take hold here? Is USC finally able to get over that hump and start being a team that should be worth talking about in the Big Ten? Or are they just going to be that team that, kind of joined the conference, but, they are more on Washington's level in the Big Ten than what they are Oregon making the switch over to the Big Ten? We'll see. Then for Michigan, it's about, can you continue to climb? It's weird to think that they are still 2 years removed from a national championship. I think one of the matchups in this game that really intrigues me, and I'm going to be very interested to see how Sherrone Moore handles this. I don't think that it's a coincidence that when Sherrone Moore wasn't coaching on the sideline, Bryce Underwood rushed for 114 yards and 61 yards. In the games that Sherrone Moore has been coaching on the sideline, Bryce Underwood has finished with -5 yards, -1 yards, and 12 yards. They found something with using Bryce Underwood's legs. And then they quickly went away from it against Wisconsin. Now, that didn't affect their ability to win. They still won 24-10. But they're really trying to get Bryce Underwood going as a passer. And I think that he is best suited as of right now, making plays with both his arm and his legs. Yes. So I'll be interested to see how that goes.
I just don't get that. I really don't understand that. I get why it happened, but I don't understand why Sherrone Moore's that way.
Yeah.
You're sticking with what?
What I said a couple weeks ago, it's the money factor and how much I think Sherrone Moore has a much bigger grasp of the numerical value that Bryce Underwood is to that team versus an interim head coach. I was like, I'm here to win games. Let's run.
Right. But that's the thing. That numerical value should be about what does he do to help you win football games. You're paying
I agree
that kind of money to help you win football games. But you're to your point, you're not saying that he doesn't think that. You're saying it's risking the injury to a guy you're paying. I get that. I think that's partly why the NFL has made their just stupid rules about quarterback hits. I saw this hit on I saw it on Twitter. A Saints guy hit a quarterback the last week, and they threw a roughing penalty. And what was worse is how many NFL fans that were in the comments saying, that's absolutely a penalty. He hit him in the helmet. And I'm like, if that's a penalty, then this is exhibit 975,365 of why I don't watch the NFL. It's not football anymore. If you can't do that, what are we even playing defense for anyway? Why do we even have pads on anymore? Mm-hmm. And I think Sherrone Moore's kind of got the mentality of, hey, we got to why are they doing that in the NFL? Because quarterbacks are making $50+ million a year. Daniel Jones made over $50 million a year. Brock Purdy signed a ginormous deal. So I just look at it and I say, man, I get why he's doing it, but I don't get why he's doing it. That your reason makes a ton of sense. It makes as much sense as anything. It's the only thing that makes sense. But I think it's an important piece to this game because if they don't let him be himself, that's what you got to do is in some games, you got to just say, hey, we don't need him to do this to beat Central Michigan. We don't need him to do this to beat New Mexico. We don't need him to do this to beat, so-and-so. The conversation could be though, but I think you did need that, in my opinion, to beat Oklahoma. And he ran 3 times for -1 yards. You did need him to do that against Nebraska. I take back the thing I said where neither of them have played a good team. I think Nebraska's a good team, and they played them at Nebraska. That's a good win for Michigan. I don't want to take that away from them. But that's still not the same as playing some of the other. They're more Missouri schedule outside of Oklahoma than some other teams. But, like I think that's going to be the interesting part is if they're just going to have him sit back in the pocket and hand off all day, and then I think they're going to have a tougher time winning. Your point about Justice Haynes is also spot on. We how many times did we say this summer, Trev? That is the portal pickup that nobody's talking about that might be one of the best portal pickups for anybody. And in 5 games, he's gone over 100 yards in every game. Every game. He went for $159 against New Mexico, 125 against Oklahoma, 104 against Central Michigan on only 14 carries, 149 against Nebraska on only 17 carries, 8.8 per carry. And he went for 117 on 19 carries against Wisconsin, 6.2 per yards per carry. That was his worst performance of the season from a yards per carry average. He went 6.16. That's his worst yards per carry output of the season. 6.16. Just so people understand, if you're averaging 6.16 yards per carry, you're very good. Very good. You're a top 30 back in yards per carry, and that's his worst performance. So, but it hasn't resulted in him scoring a lot of points, though, Trev. That's the problem. He gets his yards, but then they settle for a lot of field goals. They don't move the chains enough. They have a lot of drive stalling just outside the scoring zone, so they will punt and play field position. And I don't think that's a recipe for success at Michigan at USC. But the counter to that is, well, why would we go away from what we did last year when what we did last year, like if you'd have told me before the game, hey, can you beat Michigan? If you're USC and you say, hey, Michigan's only going to go 7 of 12 for 32 yards passing, how do you think this game is going to go? You're like, dude, we're going to murder that team. We're going to destroy that team. There's no way we're losing, only giving up 32 passing yards on 12 attempts. No way. And that's exactly what happened. And then you look at USC this year, Trev, and their run defense is not great. It's not bad, but it's not great. And 65 yards to Missouri State, 142 to Georgia Southern, 52 to Purdue, 112 to Michigan State, 171 to Illinois, 4.9 per carry. And you say, okay, well, those are good numbers, but I mean, Illinois is only averaging 130.7 yards per game. Like that 171 was the second best output of the season, only bested by Western Illinois. They ran for 2 yards against Indiana. They ran for 117 yards at Purdue, 2.9 yards per carry. They went 4.4 yards per carry, 162 yards against Western Michigan. So, that's like, I don't know how good USC's defense is still. I don't think it's still very good. So can Michigan actually win that way? Because now you've got a quarterback who, if you play ground and pound, can still hurt you way more than Alex Orji could last year throwing a football. If Bryce Underwood goes 7 of 12 throwing this game, it's going to be for like $135 because he's going to hit a couple bombs. So if you're USC, you're going to have to stop them from running the football. Going to absolutely have to stop them. You cannot let them run all over you. If you turn this in a game where, like, if you can force them to have to throw more, force them to throw more, then USC's got a good shot to win this game. Because I think the recipe for beating USC right now is, I think their rush defense is spotty, but where they've really struggled, they can't stop the pass, in my opinion. Like, they really struggle to stop the pass. They made Luke Altmaier look like a dude in that game, Trev. He went 21 of 27 for 331 yards and three touchdowns, averaged 12.3 yards per attempt. They give up 9.8 yards per attempt to Michigan State. Like, that's their bigger weakness. Can Michigan take advantage? That's going to be the big key in this game. For USC, can you make Michigan throw the football where you kind of know it's coming on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, things like that? That's going to be the key. And the other side of the ball, can you protect the quarterback enough? Because if they can give time to Jaden Maeva, I don't think Michigan can cover these receivers. This is not as good of a secondary they had a couple years. It's solid, but it's not nearly as good as it was a couple years ago when they won the title.
Yeah, big picture, I don't love this matchup for Michigan. I don't, because the areas where they need to succeed are areas that they haven't thrived in this year on offense. Like you said, Luke Altmaier looked like a dude against USC's defense, and Bryce Underwood against Power 4 opponents has not looked like a dude as a passer. He just hasn't. Last year's game was interesting because, Miller Moss had 283 passing yards, but he threw the football 51 times. I think he also had a pick 6 in that game, I think. And so I don't know if Michigan can go into this game and replicate what they did last year of like, oh, we won throwing for under 40 yards. It's like, you're just not going to be able to get it done in the same way. Brian, what do you think? Prediction time? Give a prediction for this.
Yeah, I just want to say this too. The one caveat for me about this game is I do think that USC is a very banged up football team, though.
Yeah.
That's the thing that concerns me a little bit in this game. Their center's out. I think, is Jacoby Lane still out? Let me look here real quick. I'm trying to look up his injury status. But I know he's been out. So they're a pretty banged up team, but they got rest after the Illinois game. So I think hopefully they're going to be a little healthier. I know Elijah Page is a still TBD for this game. That's the one thing that concerns me a little bit for USC, is I don't know that you're going to get your full contingent of players. And if you're a Notre Dame fan, this is the perfect game to feel okay rooting for USC, because it's USC and Michigan. They both suck. USC winning helps Notre Dame more than Michigan winning does. So you can definitely root for USC this week. I think I'm definitely Trev. I'm fight on for who I'm rooting for, but I also think USC is the better team. I do. Even being banged up, I think they can throw the ball on Michigan. I think they can. I don't know that Michigan can be as effective just ground and pound this year as they were last year. I think Jaden Maeve is a much different player this year than he was last year. I mean, it's a solid Illinois defense, and USC scored over 30 points. Scored 45 points on Michigan State. They can score. They can get into the 20s. And I don't know that Michigan can get much past that. So I actually have my prediction in, Trev. I got 31-17 USC. I think it's a game where USC scores last. So 24-17, USC scores with like 3.5-4 minutes left. And pulls away, and then Michigan can't move. That's now you've got to throw, and USC makes a stop and wins the game. So I got 31-17. I have the game being played out closer than this one, but I think USC wins a game.
I also have USC winning. I have them winning 27-13, but I don't see. I just think it'll be well within doubt early on. I think USC is always going to look like the team in control. They just won't blow the doors off of Michigan, because the style of the way that Michigan plays football games, I don't think will allow USC to turn this into a barn burner type. I mean, I'll say this flat out. If this game turns into a shootout, USC is going to win, and win big. Michigan's offense is just not set up that way. But I have USC winning 27-13. I don't think Michigan's offense is going to be able to do enough to win this one. I don't. Last season, it's very similar. Everything they do on offense is run focused. Underwood, they're trying to get him going as a passer, but he's completing 54% of his passes against Power 4 opponents. Played Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Wisconsin. USC has scored over 30 points against all 3 Power 4 opponents that they've faced. And then if USC can contain Michigan's run game, I just don't think Michigan has a whole lot of hope of putting up many points on the board, because that's what I'm doing. If Bryce Underwood beats me with his arm, then maybe that's his breakout game and welcome to college football moment, and he's going to start rolling. Maybe. Mm-hmm. But USC and D'Anton Lynn cannot let Michigan beat them by Justice Haynes going for $145 and 2 touchdowns. Just can't happen. So I have the Trojans winning 27-13.
I dig it, and that's good for Notre Dame. That would be very, because I think that we didn't kind of talk about what's at stake, because we kind of did, but like you look at USC. This is your game that lets people know, hey, we're a good team. We're a top 25 team. Put us in there. Get rid of all your preseason thoughts on what we were or would not going to be compared to Michigan. I said, I don't know if I said it in this show or if it was you and I talking. The only reason USC's out and unranked and Michigan's ranked 15th is because of what people thought both of those teams are going to be preseason. USC was preseason unranked. Michigan was ranked in the top 20. So when Michigan plays mediocre football, gets beat convincingly by Oklahoma, because that game wasn't really – if it's not for a 75-yard touchdown run by Justice Haynes, that game's not even close. It's not – Michigan could do nothing against Oklahoma. And USC's only loss is a road loss where they got a walk-off field goal hit against them by a top 20 team. So, like, it's all based on preseason predictions, and this game validates them. And I think this game, if Michigan loses, starts to raise some questions about them as a football team. And so, I think there's a lot at stake for both of these teams. A lot at stake. Now, Michigan's still in the Big Ten title hunt if they lose this game. That's only their first loss in conference. But I think I look at their schedule, Trev, and I don't know that Michigan's going to have a shot to run the table the rest of the way. They got to still play Washington at home. They got to play at Michigan State. They got to play at Maryland, who's been pretty good this year. And then they still got to play Ohio State. And I don't think they lose to this. I don't think I said that last year too, but I just think this Ohio State team's a little bit different. So I think Ohio State could score 10 points against Michigan this year and win. I mean, that's how good their defense is. Like,
I am dreading the week that we have to predict that game because it defies all logic. It defies all number. I mean, shoot, man, Ohio State's defense last year was awesome going into this game.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, dude, Michigan's throwing for like 4 yards a game, and they're at home. There's no way. And there was a way.
Yeah, you give them the ball, and Michigan's only got to go 4 yards to get points. It makes it a little bit easier to win the game. That was so bad.
Yeah, I got nothing on that one, but I agree with you. A lot at stake in this one. Both are trying to raise their stock in the Big Ten. But if I'm USC, I'm going into this game with a chip on their shoulder. It's like, wait a second, we have the same record, and this team is 15th in the country, and we're unranked.
Our only loss was a walk-off field goal on the road against the number 17 team in the country, and we're not even ranked.
Yeah, I'd feel some type of way about that if I was USC.
Absolutely. I mean, no, I absolutely would. Absolutely would.
Brian, before we get out of here today, I know there's a bunch of other games that we're also keeping our eyes on this weekend. We previewed and took a deep dive into 5 games. Those are kind of the premier ones, but there is also a lot of other good football on this weekend, Brian. I think it's going to be really interesting to talk about.
It is, Trev. It's just a lot of good games on. Like, I was like, all right, we're going to talk about 3 or 4 other games. And then I sent you the list, and it's like 9 games that we're just going to kind of go through because there's some other interesting games this week, Trev. And we'll just kind of go in order of kickoff time. This is more Notre Dame related, but also kind of ACC related, and that's Pitt against Florida State. Pitt goes to Florida State. Florida State's struggling a little bit right now. They've lost their last 2 games. Their defense has looked vulnerable. Is that a fair thing to say? And I think Miami left a lot of points on the field last week. They moved the ball pretty well on Florida State, but they just couldn't put it in the end zone, had some turnovers and some penalties that were costly. The 28-22 score was not nearly as competitive as the game actually was, in my opinion. And in the last 2 weeks, they've allowed teams to kind of move the ball pretty well on them. Virginia scored 46 on them, including an overtime, and they had no answers for Virginia. So, and with Pitt, what's interesting is Pitt is right now ahead of Florida State in the ACC rankings because even though Pitt has 2 losses, one of their losses was a non-conference loss to West Virginia. I still have no idea how they lost to West Virginia. West Virginia stinks. But this is a big game for Pitt, but I think it's an even bigger game for Florida State because right now at 3-2, people barely have you in the top 25 because they're just like, okay, the Alabama win was the anomaly. You've got to win this game, and if Florida State can win this game, their next 2 games are Stanford, Bye, and Wake Forest before they got to go to Clemson, home of Virginia Tech, at NC State, at Florida. If they don't win this game, they're cooked in the ACC. And now all of a sudden, you're talking about a potentially 4, 5, maybe even a 6-loss team. If they lose their 3rd game here, Trev, if they lose to Pitt at home, Are you positive they're going to beat Clemson on the road, NC State on the road, or Florida on the road? None of those teams are great teams, but if they're bad enough to lose at home to Pitt, then that makes me wonder if they're going to lose those other games. If you bounce back and beat Pitt, then it's like, okay, you lost to 2 pretty good football teams, and you're going to be fine.
Yeah, I mean, this game for Florida State kind of reminds me of, their season as a whole. They're on the brink of potentially falling apart a little bit because they kicked off the season really hot and not decimated, but they handled Alabama at home. I think they jumped on them a little bit and surprised them. But Florida State season, it kind of reminds you of, when you're watching like a boxing match, or like there's like those boxing movies where it's like the underdog gets a shot and, the champ is like not expecting in the first round to get, hit on the chin the way it kind of shocks you a little bit. But then the champ kind of remembers, okay, I'm still the best boxer or whatever. It's kind of how Florida State season has kind of reminded me of a little bit. It's like you come out, you have that big first round knockout punch of attempt on Alabama. And then like just the rest of the season starts to settle in and it starts to come to fruition a little bit. That's kind of what Florida State reminds me of. Right now, they're on the brink, kind of completely falling off. If you can't beat a Pitt team at home, that does not fare well. A Pitt team that decided to bench their starting quarterback from last season. Like Eli Holston didn't get hurt. They just went away from him because he was turning the football over a little bit.
And the dude that replaced him balled last week. I mean, I have no clue how to – Mason Heinschel is my best guess at this. But last week against BC in a 48-7 win, he went 30 of 41 for 323 yards and 4 touchdowns. And they did that without Desmond Reed.
Yep.
Like that was a pretty impressive performance.
It was. It was very impressive. I will say this, not to take anything away from Pitt, but Boston College defense is Swiss cheese. So the Florida State's defense, I think, just by default is better than what Boston College's defense is, but marginally, couldn't tell you by how much. But, I mean, Pitt's coming off of a 48-7 win, and Florida State's reeling. They've lost back-to-back games. So this one's going to be really interesting in terms of ACC standings. And then if you're a Notre Dame fan, you're hoping for a Pitt win.
Now, supposedly Des Reed's going to be back for this game after missing the last 2 games. They're going to need him. But you're spot on. There's 2 reasons why a Pitt win is good for Notre Dame. Number one is it gives Florida State their 3rd loss, and 10-2 Notre Dame is in over 9-3 Florida State. There's no doubt about it. I don't know about 10-2 Florida State if they run the table. They would have a win over Alabama, a win at Clemson, a win at NC State, a win over Pitt. There's some comparable performances there. And then, of course, then you would then have beat the team that beat them. And this is this is one of those common opponents. There's another shot, NC State later in the year, but it's a interesting game. I like Florida State in this game, Trev, but I'm going to be rooting for the Panthers to get this done.
Next game that I know that you wanted to highlight, TCU, Big 12 action. TCU at Kansas State, kickoff at 3:30 p.m. on Fox.
I just wanted to bring up the fact that this was my preseason prediction for the Big 12 championship game also. And I predicted Kansas State to win this game and then TCU to win the rematch. Kansas State's done. They're 2-4 right now. But now the question is, can Kansas State play spoiler? That's what's going to make things really interesting in the Big 12 because they get TCU at home and they get Texas Tech at home. And they also have to play at Utah. And here's the crazy thing about Kansas State's record. They're 2-4. They lost to Iowa State by 3. They lost to Army by 3. They lost to Arizona by 6, and they lost to Baylor by 1. They're 2-4, and they have outscored their opponents by 4 points on the season. Like, it's a weird team. So now the question is, if you're TCU, this is a more talented team than your typical 2-4 Big 12 team. You got to avoid the upset here. And I think K-State, when it's all said and done, is going to wreak a little havoc because they're going to upset a team or two that has Big 12 title game aspirations now that their season's over. Because they could go one of 2 ways. One is they're just going to collapse because the season's over. Or 2, they got nothing to lose. There's no pressure on them anymore. And then they go out and play like people thought they were. That's what makes this game interesting. I don't have a whole lot to add to the the conversation other than that. But this is a huge game for Sonny Dykes and TCU because this is the kind of sneak up on you game that could be painful when you're talking about trying to get into the conference down the road. They had that Arizona State game. I thought they were going to win that one. They had a big lead early, lost it. You've got to be able to pull off an upset here because they still got to play at, they got to still play Baylor. They got to play at West Virginia, home against Iowa State, at BYU. But they don't have to play. They don't have to play Utah. They don't have to play Texas Tech. So if you win this game, you've got a really nice path to playing in the Big 12 title game. If you can win this game, it's going to be interesting.
TCU just can't let this game be the game where Kansas State kind of puts it all together and figures it out.
Bingo.
Just can't.
Bingo.
Next game, little bit more Big Ten action. Another 3:30 kickoff on the Big Ten Network. Cornhuskers are on the road against Maryland.
This is a fascinating game, Trev. So, Maryland was so close to being 5-0 with a good win over Washington, and then just blew it in the fourth quarter. This is a game where I think the winner of this game, the coach, sets himself up for something pretty nice. If Nebraska wins, I think this is a good road win for Nebraska. It's not like they've answered their questions about they can't win the big one because it's still Maryland. But all of a sudden, you're 5-1. Your only loss is a 3-point loss to Michigan. You just smacked Michigan State. You go on the road, beat Maryland. And then you've got Minnesota on the road, Northwestern at home, USC at home, at UCLA, at Penn State, home against Iowa. You win this game, Nebraska's staring right in the face at a 9-10 win season, potentially. You lose this game, and then they're going to end up 8-4, 7-5 again. And then with Maryland, I think Mike Locksley needs this game bad. You're at home. You've still got to play Indiana. You still have to play at Illinois. You still have to play Michigan at home. You still have to play Michigan State on a neutral field. There's a lot of people wondering if he's the guy. I think a game like this is huge for him because now even if they finish like 7-5, you can say, look, we had some big wins. We had some tough losses. We got this really great freshman quarterback that wants to play for us. Just keep me here because we're building something. You lose this game, and all of a sudden you're 5-7, 6-6 again, and they don't care that the freshman quarterback's there because he's transferring anyway. You know what I mean? Like that to me is kind of what's at stake here. That's the only thing that's interesting to me is which head coach gets this must-needed win, and can Maryland bounce back from their loss last week? I think Nebraska needs this game really bad, really bad.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, you could make now. I'll say this about Nebraska: their win over Cincinnati, given what Cincinnati did to Iowa State last weekend, is looking more impressive. But Nebraska is kind of on the verge of being it's Nebraska, So ideally, that they get this turned around. They have the opportunity to do that against a good Maryland team this year. So, but I mean, it's Maryland, the one team that they've played with a pulse. Unfortunately, beat them. So this is going to be an interesting matchup for both.
Agree, but it was a game where I think they represented themselves pretty well in that loss. But we'll see how it goes. But to your point, I mean, they beat Wisconsin handily. They beat Northern Illinois handily. They beat FAU handily. That kind of thing. So, yeah. And just real quick, if you have not watched Maryland play this year, record this game and watch it later. Malik Washington is a good quarterback. True freshman quarterback. He is a good football player. Real good football player. He's fun to watch.
He is, man.
He just ran into a guy that's even better last week in DeMond Williams, who's older.
Yeah.
He got hot in the fourth quarter, but Malik Washington's a good football player.
How about this matchup, Brian? At 4:15 p.m. on the SEC Network, Arkansas on the road, now led by Bobby Petrino, against the number 12 Tennessee Volunteers in Knoxville. I will be very interested to see how this team comes out now.
Dude, big time. Like, this is either going to be here's my prediction. This is either going to be a blowout win for Tennessee or an Arkansas win. Because here's why I say that. If Arkansas comes out with the mindset they had pre-Notre Dame, I think they're a terrible matchup for Tennessee. Terrible. Because Tennessee's defense has not been good. It's been a rough year for Tim Banks. They're a team that is very different from what they were last year. They let if it's not for turnovers, Syracuse scores at least two more touchdowns. They give up 44 points to Georgia, gave up 24 points to UAB, gave up 34 points to Mississippi State. Their defense has not been that great this season. And I think their pass defense is the one part of it that really struggles. And Arkansas can throw the football. I also think Arkansas's got nothing to lose, and we're going to find out. And what's going to come down to, do they like Bobby Petrino or not? Because if it's like, dude, Coach Petrino's our dude, he's going to get us set and they got nothing to lose. They've got a bye week. Their coach got fired. Let's put some good tape on there for the teams we're going to transfer to or for the NFL. All the pressure's on Tennessee in this game. And Arkansas beat Tennessee last year. So Tennessee's looking for payback. But as we've seen, Trevor, that hasn't mattered a whole lot the last couple of years. We keep thinking no, this is payback for last year. And it almost rarely turns out that way. So I'm fascinated by this game. And what would a win for Arkansas do for Notre Dame? Because now it's hold on a second. They almost beat a ranked Memphis team. They almost beat a top 5 Ole Miss team. They just went on the road and beat Tennessee. Maybe Notre Dame is that good. So I think there's a Notre Dame aspect to this for me as well. But
yeah, I
am very fascinated by this game.
The over-under for this game is set at 68.5, and that's real tempting.
Oh, dude, yes, it is. But that will come down to, though, what we were talking about is this Arkansas team have any motivation whatsoever, or are they packed it in?
Yep.
If you were to tell me, hey, Brian, I know somebody that's an insider at Arkansas. He was at every practice this week. That team was fired up. They were having fun. They're gonna come out and play hard. I'd be like, dude, take the over. But I don't know if that's it or if it's like, hey, we're done. Our season's over. Blah 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 blah. I don't know what's gonna happen. But I know Bobby Petrino wants that job. So he's going to do everything he can to get that job. And this is the kind of game you go on the road and win this game. It's like you could see just that.
Oh, yeah. Agreed. Sticking in the SEC for the next game, 7 p.m. kickoff. A lot of night game slates to keep your eye on. 7 p.m. on ESPN. Florida Gators on the road against the number 5 Texas A&M Aggies. Another Notre Dame implication game.
Yeah.
This would be interesting.
What do you think of this game, Trev? I don't think it's going to be close.
No, I don't either. I'm glad we're talking about it because it's still Notre Dame implications, but it's just, can Texas A&M keep rolling? And when I mean rolling, I don't mean roll Florida and that they'll win 43-10. But can they keep winning? Florida State kind of got their win of that people weren't expecting them to beat Texas. Some were, the majority weren't. But, you and I called it last week. We said that Florida was either going to beat Texas or get blown out. It was going to be one or the other. And there we go. But I do think Texas A&M is good. Their defense, I think, is grossly underrated for Texas A&M. Their offense, I think, has kind of been a little overrated. I think that their performance against Notre Dame gave them a little bit too much attention. But I do like what their defense is. They had a good defensive performance against Mississippi State when they played, but Florida's team is still a hot mess. I'm not letting that Texas win kind of distract what type of team I think that they are. So I have the Aggies in this one.
I like A&M's offense a little better than you do. I thought they moved the ball pretty well. They ran all over Mississippi State last week. I just think it's inconsistent. It's a big play offense. They don't consistently move the ball. I don't know that Florida's got a banged up D-line. I don't know how they're going to be. But I just think that any chance you had at being overlooked by Texas A&M is gone now. They're going to say, hey, this team beat Texas, and not just beat Texas, Trev. They thoroughly beat. I mean, that game was not as close as the 8-point final score. I mean, they thoroughly beat Texas last week. So I don't know how. I mean, A&M's not going to overlook them now. They're not. And so I think they're going to get. I think you're going to get their best game, and I think A&M wins. But that Florida team is dangerous because they do have talent. They do have talent. So
just got to stay focused. But you get them at home. You get them at night at Kyle Field. And obviously us Notre Dame fans know how tough of an environment that is to play in. And now they're good. Like now they're ranked in the top 5. They're not going to let a Florida team sneak up on them. I agree with you completely. Absolutely agree. Next game, we're switching back over to the Big 12, 7:30 p.m. kickoff on Fox. Kansas is on the road against number 9, Texas Tech.
I'm a believer in the Red Raiders, but this is the kind of game you learn if they can handle success. Kansas is do you know what the line, have the line in front of you from FanDuel, Trev?
Yeah, let me find the over-under for this game.
I just, it's one of those games where this is a game that would scare me a little bit. Like, look, this is a team with a dangerous quarterback. Their offense can score. Yeah, their defense isn't very good, but how are you feeling about your team? Like you're rolling right now. You're pretty good. Can you handle success? Can you say, hey, look, we've won, but we weren't just trying to be better this year. We were trying to win a Big 12, and we're not even halfway to that point yet. So I think this is just one of those potential trap games for Texas Tech. That's why this game is on my list, Trev, of games I'm keeping an eye on. It's just got, I don't know, you may disagree with this. I just think it's got trap game written all over it. You got Arizona State coming up on the road next week. There could be some looking ahead. This has got trap game written all over it. It really.
No, I think so too. I mean, FanDuel right now has the line set at Texas Tech is favored by 14.5. The over/under is set at 58.5.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. I like Texas Tech in this game matchup wise, but what do we say? Upsets come down to teams with dynamic quarterbacks and teams that can score, and that's exactly who Kansas is. So I got my eye on this one. This is one of my potential upset alert games, Trev, for the week.
Yep, agreed. And I think the next game that we're getting ready to talk about might also be on your upset alert for what we talked about last night. Switching over to the SEC, 7:30 p.m. kickoff on ABC. The number 10 Georgia Bulldogs on the road against the Auburn Tigers. Brian, talk to us about it.
Trev, this is a weird game for me. Auburn, there's nothing about Auburn that should make you think they can beat Georgia, except for the fact, two things. And you and I went through the past years. They almost always have a game every year where they beat somebody they're not supposed to or almost do. And say whatever you want about Auburn, and they're not a great team this year, but they went on the road and beat a good Baylor team. Baylor's not great, but that's a good Baylor team. Battled back. Baylor's 4-2, and their only losses are a 2-touchdown loss to Auburn. The next week, they went on the road and beat SMU. Their only other loss was a 3-point home loss to Arizona State, and they rallied back with wins over Oklahoma State, and then last week they beat Kansas State at home. So Baylor's a quality football team, and Auburn beat them, and in the second half just ran it down their throat. Just ran it down their throat. And then they lost to Oklahoma by a touchdown, and then they lost to Texas A&M by 6. And so I look at this football team and I'm like, dude, if their offense can just have a pulse in this game, they've got a shot to pull off an upset. Because you look at Georgia and like they've been a weird team this year offensively. Like they look okay, but then they don't score a lot of points. And they dominated Kentucky, but it was kind of sloppy. Their offense didn't look great against Alabama. They scored 20 against Austin Peay. And oh, by the way, they got Ole Miss coming up next week. Do they overlook Auburn with Ole Miss coming up? Like, that's why this game can scare me a little bit. If I'm Kirby Smart, I am all over my team this week in practice to make sure that doesn't happen. But Auburn's got a legit defense this year. Their offense is just trash. Like, it's terrible. I hate to use such a pejorative term to describe it. That's not like really the term you an analyst should be using, but I don't know how else to describe it. It's an awful offense. They had 177 yards of offense last week against Texas A&M. I don't think Texas A&M's defense is that good. Like, that good. Not like they're not that good. They're not that good where they should hold an SEC team like Auburn to 177 yards of offense. Like, no, that shouldn't happen.
Their offense is putrid, and it shouldn't be. And I think that's the frustrating part. When you have Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton, the quarterback play and Jackson Arnold just isn't it. I'm sorry.
Nope.
Nope. It's the offense that they're going with. But I agree with you. Auburn just kind of randomly has those games at home that, for whatever reason, I mean, we saw it in the Iron Bowl in 2021. We were going through some of the games last night. So I agree, man.
I agree. Honestly, I think he's still on the team. Ashton Daniels is not worse than Jackson Arnold right now. Like, he's not. So, yeah.
No. And Ashton Daniels has experience just kind of throwing it up to a premier target. I mean, that's what he did when Alike Eomanor was there at Stanford with him. I mean, he could at the very least target Cam Coleman a little bit more than what he's already being targeted. That's just such a weird offense, man. Very weird. Yep. Next game, ACC, 7:30 p.m. kickoff. Clemson on the road against Boston College.
I know this is one that you had some interest in, Trevor.
It is. This game is interesting because Clemson has by far been probably the most disappointing team of the college football season, I would say, for everything that they had going for them, who they had coming back, the offseason acquisitions that they made on both player and coaching staff. Then you look at what their season has been, and their most impressive win has been against North Carolina, probably the laughingstock of college football right now. And so who is this Clemson team? I have no idea. Boston College, really after their overtime loss against Michigan State, the wheels kind of fell off. They're sitting at 1-4 right now. And so now what's dangerous for Clemson is with their very mediocre defense, they're going up against an offense on the road at night that's a dynamic offense that can put points on the board, and they're a team that just doesn't have anything to lose. If Boston College loses this game, people are like, yeah, they lost to Clemson. No duh. But the thing that I find interesting about this game is, like, what is the resolve of this Clemson team? They've lost every meaningful game that they're supposed to play. And yeah, they beat North Carolina. In no way does that win do anything for me. I don't care what it looked like. So they scored on 6 straight possessions. Like, yeah, it was North Carolina. Their coach is not even halfway through the season, and they're talking about buyout options for him. Like, we're not.
They canceled their Hulu series.
Yeah.
They were doing like a season with North Carolina on Hulu. They canceled it. Yeah, we're not doing that crap. This place is a train wreck. We didn't want to do a soap opera.
Oh, man.
This guy's making out with a child on the sidelines of games. Like, it's just it's so weird.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's gross. Like, it's not even like, ooh, like drama this isn't even drama. This is gross.
Yeah.
It's gross.
It's foul. And the only reason why I wanted to talk about this game is I will be interested to see, does Boston College, can Bill O'Brien get this team to play like they don't have anything to lose? Because they don't. They're 1-4. They're not competing for the ACC title. They're not in any sort of playoff conversation. But can you go and be the next team that kind of spoils Clemson's road back to being somewhat relevant? I mean, Clemson's season from an ACC standpoint, it's not like the nail's not in the coffin. A loss to Boston College would do that. And so I'll be very interested to see what Boston College does at home at night against Clemson. And I'll be interested to see if Clemson can keep what little momentum they have going, because this season for them has been crazy.
Yes. They need this. They need to play well in this game, Trev.
Yep.
Because here's the crazy thing about Clemson. They're sitting here at 2-3, just some bad losses on their schedule. Not bad in like they lost to bad teams, but like bad in like how they played. They did not play well against LSU. They played terrible against Syracuse. They win this game. They're now 3-3. Only got 2 conference losses. They got to play SMU at home, Duke at home, Florida State at home, all winnable games. Now, they could lose all 3 of those games too, Trev. I mean, but they could, win all of them. Then they're at Louisville, and then that's their conference slate. They only got one more conference road game left after this game, because then they got Furman and South Carolina. You could be sitting there looking at Clemson 8-4 playing for the ACC title, which is gross.
Yeah.
And knowing how Dabo is, they beat Miami and get into the playoff. You know what I mean? Like, it'd be so gross. And then get swamped by somebody in the 5-12 matchup.
Yeah.
Like Notre Dame will beat them, just destroy them. And Clemson coming up to South Bend in December, But, like, they need this game bad, because they could actually like run the table and go 9-3, and all of a sudden you're like, dude, like Clemson gets into the playoff again at 10-3, and now we're back to overhyping them again next year.
Yeah.
Like, this is the kind of game where you not only need to win, I think you need to look good winning, because I think you need to build that confidence.
Yep.
But BC has, like you said, Trev, absolutely nothing to lose. Nothing.
And nothing to lose in a good offense is a bad recipe for a team that's kind of struggling like Clemson. That's dangerous territory. Now, am I calling my shot saying Boston College is going to win? No, I'm not. It's just I'd be on the lookout for how this game looks, because it wouldn't surprise me at all if, we're wrapping up the post-game show on Saturday and we're sitting back and I pull up the score and it's like 17-14 in the third quarter. That's going to be really, really interesting. But keep my eye on that one for sure. Last couple here, Brian. Going back to the SEC, South Carolina on the road against LSU, coming off of a bye. Last game out, LSU lost to Ole Miss. South Carolina's traveling down to Death Valley to take on the Tigers. So what do you think of this one?
This isn't a fascinating game, Trev, because another team that has nothing to lose is South Carolina. And LSU's got a lot of pressure on them right now. I hate people say, oh, you lose a game, it's good to have a bye week. I think completely the opposite, usually. You've had 2 weeks now to sit in this funk of how people feel about LSU. And Brian Kelly and catching all this flack. And South Carolina is a team with nothing to lose. And a team that thinks they can beat you because of how they played against you last week. They also had a bye week but their bye week is coming off of a 35-13 win over Kentucky, where they started to somewhat look like South Carolina again. And can this be the game where Lenore Sellers figures it out? Because I still don't think LSU has any concept of how to defend a mobile quarterback. So, and if Lenoris doesn't get hurt last year, they beat South Carolina. Now, the question is can Lenoris get back to playing like people thought he was going to play? We told y'all before the season, he's a good quarterback, but he's got a lot to prove. He is not a guy that was consistently, doing certain things. And, he needs to look actually more like the guy that they saw against Missouri, the guy that threw for over 300 yards, but then he's got to run like he did against Kentucky. He hasn't been able to put those two things together in a game this year. It's like when he throws it really well, he doesn't run well, but when he runs well, he doesn't throw it very well. But the thing is, the way the LSU is playing right now, you don't have to score a lot of points to beat this LSU football team. So, can they win with 24? So, yeah, it's going to be interesting.
I have South Carolina in the upset.
Wow.
Wow. LSU has not proven to me that they can stop a mobile quarterback, and their offense is not. And no bye week is going to help your offense get back on track. It's just not. Their offense has not looked like it should.
Yeah.
Offensive line plays a big part in that.
That's a huge part in that. This is what I kept telling people in the offseason. Like, guys, they got these new transfer receivers. Receiver was not their problem last year.
Nope.
It was not. Running back is not their problem. Quarterback's not their problem. Lo and behold, when Garrett Nussmeier, like every other quarterback in college football, is playing behind a garbage offensive line, he's going to look like he looks. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like, shocker that Garrett Nussmeier struggles with constant pressure. Well, duh. And then Brian Kelly wants to blame Garrett Nussmeier. Garrett Nussmeier's got to play better. Well, hey, man, how about you in year 4 build an offensive line that can actually protect Garrett Nussmeier? I'm just, call me crazy, but isn't that kind of your job there, Mr. Kelly, to build an offensive line that's competent to protect your quarterback? I kind of think that's a big deal.
All I'm saying, Dylan Stewart is licking his chops.
Oh, my gosh.
Going into this game. I think between Dylan Stewart and Lenora Sellers, they're going to do enough to win. It's going to look ugly. Yep. But, LSU has scored over 24 points once this season, and it was against Southeast Louisiana.
Yep. And they scored 23 points against Louisiana Tech. I mean, come on, dude. Like, they're just like you said, they're not a good offensive football team.
No,
They're really not.
When you look at a big picture, everybody's, oh my goodness, like, you have a 3-2 South Carolina team upsetting the number 11 ranked team in the country. It's like, yeah, look who the number 11th ranked team in the country is.
Yeah.
Like, they're not. Their defense has actually been the more impressive side of the ball for me than what their offense has been. But
their defense has been outstanding. I'm serious right now. I'm not even joking, not even hyperbolic. If you put this defense with the 2023 LSU offense, they're a national title contender.
Oh, 100%.
But that's the story of Brian Kelly's life. How many times we say that in Notre Dame? If you could put the 2012 defense with the 2015 offense, or the 2017 offensive line with the 2018 this, or the 2013, like, that's been his thing. If you could put this unit with that unit from different years, Notre Dame could win a championship. If you put the 2018 defense with the 2015 offensive line, Notre Dame's not losing anybody. Put the 2012 defense with the 2015 offense, they're not losing anybody. But that's been Brian Kelly's MO his whole career, is he can't put two sides together. You take the offense from 2 years ago and the defense from this year, I don't think they're losing a game. But now they're as bad on offense this year as they were on defense 2 years ago. And that's their problem. I mean, and I thought the defense handled itself relatively well. You held a pretty good Ole Miss offense of 24 points. Like, what else are you supposed to do? This is a team 2 years ago in LSU that scored 49 points in a game to Ole Miss and lost. Like, we held them to 24 points. What do you want from us? So yeah, I don't know what you want from them. I mean, Ole Miss has scored 63, 30, 41, and 45 points in their other 4 games. You held them to 24. Should have been good enough for a win. But their offense is not good. And it's everybody's fault except for Brian Kelly's, apparently.
Haven't you heard?
Yeah. I've heard it a lot, actually, over my years. But I actually do like LSU in this game, probably more than I should, just because I just have not been impressed with South Carolina. But I agree with everything you said. I just can't bring myself to pick South Carolina to win. But, man, would I enjoy it. But I'll tell you this, too. This is a huge game for LSU, Trev, because you look at their schedule coming up. If they lose this game to go to 4-2, they got to play at Vanderbilt next week, home against Texas A&M the next week. Then they have a bye. Then they got to play at Alabama. They got to play home against Arkansas, Western Kentucky home, and then at Oklahoma. If they lose this game because their offense still stinks, they're going to lose to Vandy. They're going to lose to A&M. They're going to lose to Alabama. And I don't know if it's a given that they're going to beat Arkansas. Because if Arkansas plays against LSU like they played against Ole Miss, that's a dub for Arkansas. And Arkansas has gone into Baton Rouge in recent years and given LSU a game. So it's going to be very interesting, Trev. 2 years in 2023 with Jane Daniels, Arkansas lost by 3 points in Baton Rouge. So, yeah. They beat LSU when they played in Baton Rouge in 2021.
Man. It'll be interesting.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, I do, and I think if they win this game, though, I think maybe they get a little bit more confidence and they get back on track and they can, but they're not going to be a playoff team this year unless something dramatically changes on offense.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Last game to talk about, Brian. A little football after dark. 10:15 p.m. kickoff on ESPN. Number 21, Arizona State on the road against Utah Utes. It's going to be a fun one in the Big 12.
Yes. Utah is a team that's might be the most disrespected team in college football right now. Like, I was having a debate with a voter in one of the polls the other day, and I'm like, how do you have Penn State ranked ahead of Utah? Utah's 4-1. Their only loss is to a top 10 team, and they played the very team that Penn State just lost to on the same very field that Penn State lost and beat them by over 30. It goes back to there's too many of the voters that are just looking at the preseason rankings. This is a legit Utah team. And the game against Texas Tech was competitive for a while. Texas is a really good football team, and they pulled away in the fourth quarter. But this Utah team is legit. Trev, they beat UCLA by 33, Cal Poly by 54, Wyoming by 25, and then they bounced back from their loss to Texas Tech with a 34-point win over West Virginia. Arizona State obviously had that bad early loss against Mississippi State in week 2. They've rallied back with a win over Texas State, and then they've had 2 hard-fought wins in a row. Same score, 27-24 at Baylor and then home against TCU. Arizona State has Texas Tech coming up next week at home. They still have to play at Iowa State. If they're going to win the Big 12, they've got to beat Utah. If you're Utah, you get yourself poised for a rematch if you can win this game, because their slate the rest of the way looks a lot smoother. They have to play at BYU next week, which is going to be tough. The Holy War is going to be a battle. But then they've got Colorado at home, Cincinnati at home, at Baylor, home against Kansas State, at Kansas. So there's some potential losses on there. There's a lot of potential wins on there. So I think this game is going to go a long way towards positioning one of these teams to be in the title game. And here's the thing about Arizona State. If they beat Utah, they're now 2 games up on Utah in the league, because now they're only 1 game up overall record. They're 5-1. Utah's 4-2. But both of Utah's, or it would mean both of Utah's losses would be in conference, where Arizona State's still undefeated in conference because their loss is out of conference. So if Utah wants to have a shot to play for the Big 12 or the Big 12 title, which you and I both said they were a dark horse for before the season, they've got to win this game. Got to win this game. I don't know if they can do it, but they've got to win this game. I've not been impressed with Arizona State the last couple weeks in a lot of ways, but you know what I have been impressed by? They find ways to win. And they're not as sexy as they were last year. They're not as, but they just find ways to win, Trev. And you've got to give Kenny Dillingham a lot of credit for getting that team. This isn't a great Arizona State team. They're not as good as I thought. But if they can keep weathering these storms and pulling out these ugly wins, they're going to get hot at some point in time. And that's when they get dangerous.
Oh, agreed. I mean, they're kind of going through a little bit of what Boise State was going through, trying to figure out who they are without Ashton Genty. And Arizona State was trying to figure out who they were without Cam Scatterbo, who is running like an absolute crazy person in the NFL. Different story for a different day. But I agree with you. This is going to be a big conference championship implication game for both teams. Arizona State's looking to kind of return to the limelight higher up. And then Utah, I agree with you completely. I do think they're one of the more disrespected teams in the country. So very, very interested to watch this one go down. I'm hoping I can stay awake for it. But, yeah, for the whole game. But that should be definitely a good one. I'm excited to watch it. Excited to watch Devin Dampier, too. That kid's electric.
Again, if you have not watched Utah play, watch, because that kid's fun to – and their defense is pretty good this year. Who do you like in this game, Trev? I actually like Utah in this game.
I do, too.
Yeah.
I do, too. I think that Utah does enough to give Arizona State some problems, like the mobile quarterback, solid defense. I'll be interested to see Utah's ability to stop Jordan Tyson, because not a lot of teams have been able to figure out a way to completely shut him down yet. And that's kind of their whole offense, Sam Leavitt and Jordan Tyson. But Arizona State's defense has been scrappy. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting. Brian, I do know we have a couple of super chats before we head out of here today.
We do.
From our guy.
What's crazy about this weekend, Trev, is there's other games we could have pointed to.
Oh, yeah.
Like there are so many other games that I considered to talk about this weekend, like Rutgers, Washington tomorrow night. I mean, it's, UCLA, Michigan State, all of a sudden is an interesting game. Like there was other games we could have talked about, which is what I think makes, Iowa State at Colorado, Northwestern at Penn State. They both played UCLA in the last couple weeks. One of them beat UCLA, one of them didn't. I mean, I'm just saying. So,
if Penn State loses to Northwestern, I am driving to Happy Valley and setting up camp and doing live shows next week there.
Yes. That would be so great. Big game for Luke Fickell this weekend. They're home against Iowa. If they lose at home to Iowa, I just don't know that he can recover from that. There's a BYU plays at Arizona. BYU's 18th and 5-0. Arizona's 4-1. That's another fascinating matchup. So just a lot of really good games on this weekend, man. I can't wait for it. So anyway, that's where I'm at with that. So we do have three super chats, all from Michael S.
Thank you for the super chat, Michael. First one. How does NC State compare to Purdue, Arkansas, and Boise State? What strengths do they have that Notre Dame hasn't seen and can hurt them?
Well, Michael, I don't mean to disrespect you on this one, but like that's what our last two shows were about. So I would encourage you to go watch the last two shows. I'll give you a quick synopsis, but I can't do justice to this question because like we literally talked about that the last 2 weeks. But they're very comparable to Arkansas. That's the most comparable team to them in that they have a tall, skinny, talented quarterback that can throw and hurt you with his legs. I think CJ's a better passer than Taylon Green. He's not as dynamic as of a runner, but there's some similarities to their games. CJ's more comfortable sitting in the pocket, where we said about Taylon Green, like, keep him in the pocket. You don't want CJ Bailey sitting in the pocket with time to throw because he'll carve you up. Much better receiving core, though. Their defenses are similar. I actually think Arkansas probably has a slightly better defense than NC State does. Neither of them are good there. They're a lot better team than Purdue. And they're a very different team from Boise. They are polar opposites. Boise's tough, hard-nosed, well-coached. NC State's athletic, talented, long, not super well-coached. But what do they have that Notre Dame hasn't seen that can hurt them? Nothing. There's nothing they haven't seen that can hurt them. There are things that they have seen that they haven't stopped that NC State does that can hurt them. So, like, you look at them, this is the best receiving core since the A&M game. Have they gotten better? Because if they play like they did against A&M, then NC State will move the ball, throw for a bunch of yards, and it's going to be a shootout.
The only thing that you could make the argument here for, Michael, is a dynamic tight end. Because Matt Lauder didn't play for Boise State last Saturday.
And they're different type of players. Matt Lauder's more of a traditional, not traditional, but more of a modern / traditional tight end, in that he does a lot of things like Eli Raridan does, where Justin Jolly's like Evan Ingram. He's more of an H-back than he is a tight end. But yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. Outside
of that, that's really offensively, they've seen it all. Big D lines, athletic D lines. I agree. It's nothing that they haven't seen outside of one position.
Michael, I love you, man, but like literally all three of these super chats are from a negative point of view. You got to start looking at the world more favorable, my man. It's okay. But get to the next one. Thank you, Michael, for the super chat.
Is winning this game season saving for NC State?
No, because if they go lose 3 more games afterwards, they're not going to look back and like, yeah, but we beat Notre Dame. No, it's not.
In the scheme of the ACC, this game means nothing in terms of where you rank in the ACC. Whether you lose to Notre Dame or beat Notre Dame, your record in conference is still the same.
Yeah. Yep. Now, could it be a game that gives them the confidence to then go win a bunch of games? Yes. But it's what follows that, season saving it. I think if they just play competitively against Notre Dame, it could still do that.
Yeah.
And then the last one.
And is NC State a trap game for Notre Dame?
Michael, before the season, this was our trap game. I don't know that it's a trap game now because Notre Dame's in you can't overlook anybody mode. But I do worry a little bit about them thinking about USC next week. And I just don't know if USC unranked has the same draw. Like, hey, we're really locked into this game. I worried about that a little bit. I wonder how much that was the case with Louisville in 2023, where you had top 10 undefeated USC coming up the next week. Louisville's Louisville, and then you overlooked them a little bit. I do worry about that. But if you're the Notre Dame players, especially the Notre Dame defensive players, any thought of overlooking USC goes away like Monday when you start watching film, I would think.
Gotta hope.
Yeah.
Definitely gotta hope.
But there's always that fear.
Yeah. Well, listen, folks, that's going to do it here for us today on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Bryan and Sean will be back tomorrow for RTCF, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's the plan for now.
Right on. And then I'll be back on Saturday for the post-game show. But if you haven't gotten enough of me today, I'll be on IB Nation Sports Beat here in about a half an hour. And then I'll be going live at 8 p.m. on the CFB Nation channel to do this week's edition of the Spread Option. So a lot more content coming your guys' way. Before you head out of here, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you subscribe to this channel. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until next time, that's Bryan. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.